What a view! This is incredible. An Ontario County nonprofit. Overlook Horizon high-altitude balloons.
3, 2, 1, launch.
Hey guys, Tori here from Overlook Horizon. We are live this morning for the big event here. I forgot to change this background here. It's not supposed to be this background. It's supposed to be this background. But we are live getting ready for SpaceX's in-flight abort test, which might actually happen today. They were going to try for yesterday, but we had some weather issues, actually weather for the recovery zone issues there. They've been struggling with weather all morning today. Originally it was 8 o'clock, then they pushed it to 10 o'clock. Now we're pushed to 10:30, which is in a little under 45 minutes from now. So that's a rough countdown to get us to the T0 that they are aiming for right now for the in-flight abort test. So the good news is here, and the reason that we're going live is that at T-minus 45 minutes, which just happened, the launch director gives go for propellant loading, which happened. They called out on the countdown net that they are go to proceed with the for the T0 of 10:30. And this is important for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, once they start loading propellant into the rockets, I say this every time, even when they're launching satellites, but once they start loading propellant into the rockets, they're really going to give it a try. They feel like there's a chance that they can proceed at this point. If they think the chance is zero that they're going to launch, they're not even going to go to this stage. They're going to they're either going to delay it further into the window, because this window today extends until 2 p.m. Eastern time, so we've got another 4 hours or so left in the window. But the downside is the cloud cover gets worse and worse as the day goes on today. So this is probably their best chances at 10:30. So they're going to proceed with that. But the second reason that this is also important is because part of this mission, although they do have a large window and they've got more time later in the day that they could potentially recycle and reset, one of the important aspects of this test is that this is a dress rehearsal for crewed missions. So in a crewed mission to the International Space Station, this would be an instantaneous launch window. And so I suspect, I mean, they didn't really come out and say this, but I suspect that they're going to be running this like it's an instantaneous launch window, from this point forward, because basically they want to practice the entire procedure like they had crew on board and everything else. So they're going to be arming the launch escape system. Comes up at T-minus 37 minutes. Even though there's no crew on board, they will arm that launch escape system in about 4 minutes from now. That'll be armed before they start loading propellant into the booster and the second stage, so that if anything were to happen on the launch pad, that the Crew Dragon could escape, because the Crew Dragon has hypergolic propellant in it already. That gets loaded actually like a week or two prior, before the Falcon 9 the Falcon 9 and the Crew Dragon even go out to the launch pad. So Crew Dragon already has its hypergolic propellant on board, and then they'll arm that system at T-minus 37 minutes. And if anything were to go wrong, even today, if anything goes wrong, it would perform a pad abort. It's going to be armed and ready to do that today. Same thing that, so the whole purpose of this flight, I guess we'll go through the whole thing. And I do see a bunch of messages. We'll get to everybody. We'll say hello in just a minute here. But basically today, they're going to be launching hopefully at 10:30. That's the idea here. The launch is going to last for 84 seconds. Then at 84 seconds, the abort sequence will be triggered. As pre-programmed, should be right around max Q. That will be triggered. The booster will shut down its engines and cut thrust, and then the Crew Dragon will perform an abort, separate. Once it gets to apogee, or the highest points in its current suborbital trajectory, it will release the trunk, flip around, get some drogue parachutes out, and then parachute into the ocean. Hopefully all goes well. But where I was going with that is that because the abort system will be armed just like this was a normal flight, if anything were to go wrong between 0 and 84 seconds, let's say at 60 seconds, the rocket just decides to go off course, it will still perform an abort. In fact, that's what happened, if you watch the video I just put out, that's what happened in the 1965 Little Joe 2 abort test. That was supposed to be an abort test that was going to abort later in the sequence, but the rocket and the booster, the Little Joe rocket, started rolling uncontrollably and started to break up, and the abort was triggered early. It still was a successful test for what they wanted to do, just didn't happen quite at the point in the mission that they wanted. So that could potentially happen. That's a possibility today, but probably chances are slim, I would say. Hopefully we just see a normal abort at 84 seconds. So that's what's in store here for today. So hello, everybody. I see everybody joining us here on YouTube, Periscope, Facebook. I see Carol over on Facebook, Thomas on Facebook. Hello. I see Chris and Columbia and Jen over on Periscope. And then over on the YouTube, we got the whole gang here: Gordon, Sebi, Gregorius, Oscar, Adrian, Glenn. So hello to everybody. Thanks for hanging out with us and joining in the excitement here today. I am super excited. I really hope the weather holds out today. That's going to be the big variable here. So Glenn said just before I went live, he said that the launch area high ceilings completely are obstructing the view. So that is a concern. John Innsbrucker, actually, from SpaceX, who's one of the regulars on their live broadcasts, also an engineer there, actually tweeted out, said that, so there's a NASA plane, probably could have pulled up the flight path for it, but there's a NASA plane that is circling the area. I'm going to try to pull this up here now while I'm talking. That is circling the area that has really high quality cameras on board. And according to John Innsbrucker, that plane has visibility into the area, and it'll be able to see what it needs to see. But he did say that as the clouds start to increase, the chances of viewing the breakup of the Falcon 9 booster might be a little less for people on the ground. Or even maybe like the SpaceX tracking camera. So there's a chance, from the sounds of it right now, what it sounds like is that they're going to push for launch and that they think that they can go, but we might not see the Falcon 9 breakup because the cloud cover might obstruct it. So that would be kind of unfortunate, but that's a possibility here right now. So I was trying to pull up the plane that I'm looking for, the NASA plane, but I don't see it on radar. There is this isn't the plane that I was thinking of. There's another plane that's circling the area. But this looks like I don't know, the picture of it is like just a regular Cessna. I suppose I could show you what I'm talking about here. Let's see. Switch over to this view. We'll look at a couple things. We're going to look at weather. We're going to look at what's going on here, but this is what I was looking at, or what I was trying to tell you guys about. This is Flight Radar 24 here, just showing the area. So we're launching from Cape Canaveral today. Nice little short launch right into the Atlantic Ocean, and they're launching from pad 39A, which is right up here. Or no, that's 39B. Sorry, 39A right here. 39A is here. SLS will launch from 39B, which is up here. And I think this is the NASA plane, although I was expecting a different picture than this. That's not a picture, but I don't know anybody else that would be allowed to fly in this area right now. So he's kind of just doing some loops around. But there was a NASA plane that was circling around forever. I suppose I could look up what the tail number was for that, but I don't see it anywhere. Let me see. Let me see if I can get this tail number here. N928NA. N928NA. Let's look at this. Whoa. There we go. That's what we're looking. That's the plane I'm looking for right there. Okay, now you can see there's a better picture of it. That's the one I'm looking for. I guess there's another one flying around here. I don't know what that is, but there he is. He's way up here. He's kind of just holding, circling the area. But that's the plane right there that has the nice tracking cameras on board circling the area right now, and according to what they're saying, should have views even with the cloud cover. So we might not be able to see it, but hopefully they will be able to see it just fine. But we'll keep an eye on that, and hopefully if you guys hear anything, you let me know. I'm trying to keeping like one eye on Twitter and one eye on the broadcast here, to see if we have any issues. Let's see. Dragon launch escape system has been armed. That's happened. So that should have happened to T-37. So that sounds like we're on schedule here. Crew access arm has been retracted. So they're pulling that away. So that's basically, at this point, the crew would be on board and ready for any sort of abort sequence at this point here. Sorry, I'm trying to read at the same time, make sure I'm not missing any major events. Let's see, drag arm, yeah, that's good. Okay, saw that. Wow, got so many Twitter notifications here. I'm gonna have a hard time keeping up with all of these. So, all right, let's get back over here so I can switch my view. We got a couple other things that we can show as well. Let's take a look at weather so we can see what we're looking at here today, and then you guys shoot me any questions. I'll try to get to some of these things on what's happening, but I do want to show some weather here so you can see. This is a little bit unique in the sense that this is going to be the case for all the Dragon Crew Dragon missions, but this is going to make it more complicated to actually launch. So in a typical launch, you've got all sorts of weather constraints for ground level winds, cloud cover, precipitation, all that kind of thing. But in addition to that, now on every Crew Dragon launch, they're going to have to evaluate the possible abort sites for conditions as well. So even in a flight that's not an actual in-flight abort, they're going to be evaluating the sea conditions, wind at sea, sea waves, and what the chances are for crew, or the recovery crew, to be able to get to the astronauts if they had to do some sort of abort sequence. So there's lots of things that they're going to have to evaluate going forward to do these launches, and that's just going to make it a lot more complicated. And I suspect that you're going to see weather scrubs much more frequently with crewed missions than you would with like a satellite mission, just because of the extra constraints that they're going to have along with it. So we're looking at wind conditions here right now. This is pretty much ground level winds here. Wind conditions are not terrible right now. They do bump up to 30 miles per hour as you get 500 meters off the ground there. But the big concern really is going to be this cloud cover. And I don't know, it's tough to see in this particular view. I wonder, let's see, can you see it in precipitation? So there's a front here. You can kind of see it if I zoom out here, but there's a front right here that is moving this direction towards the Cape. And that is, let's see, let's look at radar here. You can kind of see this front moving in, and they're trying to launch ahead of that, because the later you get in the launch window, you can kind of see. So here's a look at this front right here. It's pretty much right here in this region, but as that comes across, I guess it's this way in the camera view, as it comes across Cape Canaveral like that, that's going to make the chances of launch a lot slimmer later in the window. But ocean conditions are okay right now, so that's good news. And that's the other thing. That was what they were looking at yesterday, was wave conditions, and really they're not going very far offshore, so they're only going right out in this region. So we're about 7-foot waves right now, 5-7 foot waves, and then that's significant wave height. And then the wave periods about every 4 seconds here. Swell wave period. It's every 10 seconds. So it's good spacing between the waves. So I think they're in relatively good shape from the ocean standpoint, much better than it was yesterday We could take a look at yesterday's real quick. Let's see, past days, January 18th. January 18th at, we'll say 10 a.m. Yeah. Let's see, what was a wave height yesterday? Oh, this is only looking at like, what was the swells at? 8 feet, 8-foot swells, 8 to 9 feet there. So it was a little worse yesterday. And you can see that pretty much just kind of comes right into where Cape Canaveral was, or is. So anyways, that's what we were looking at yesterday, but that's the and the weather for today, and that's going to be the big concern here. So let's see. Let me see what we missed for comments here real quick. And SpaceX will go live here hopefully shortly, and we'll try to keep an eye on that. Let's see. Oh, Emery Kelly. I wish I was down in Florida right now. It's freezing up here, and we got a ton of snow. But Emery Kelly says the sun is shining, and we're good to go. It's hazy and windy, but it's a good sign. Fueling has begun. So this is good news. I like the sounds of this. We're under 30 minutes away. They pulled away the crew access arm. Let's see. They started fueling. What else did we miss? That's all right. I think we're in good shape. This is good. So here's what's happening today. We'll take a look, and I want to show the anime. Oh, I was going to look at comments. Did I miss any comments? Did anybody? Yeah, Trent says T-minus 37 question. T-minus 37 that's when they armed the abort system. So that's armed. If anything were to go wrong during fueling, it will do a pad abort. And the important thing, this makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know why it got so much negative press at the time, but I guess traditionally the way it's been done is they would fuel the rocket, make sure it was safe and stable, and then they would put the astronauts on board. SpaceX is not doing that. They are putting the astronauts on board and then fueling the rockets. And, a lot of people that were freaked out about that, the fueling process is, a little more dangerous than if it's fueled and just kind of hanging out. But the nice thing about this is that they put the astronauts on board and then they arm the abort sequence. So if anything were to go wrong at any point during the fueling, it'll do a pad abort. It'll pull the astronauts away to safety. In the other method, like if it's fueled first and then you're putting astronauts on board, yeah, it's a little safer that it's stable and, they verify that everything's just hanging out. But there's still that window of risk where you're putting astronauts on board a fully fueled rocket with no real easy way to get off the rocket or the launch pad if something happens in a hurry. So I personally like this much better, that they're putting the astronauts on board, arming the abort sequence, and then fueling the rocket. But yeah, so that's what's happening here today. Let's see. Thumbs up if you love science. I love it. From Alex Ziggyful. Hello world from Europe. What else did we miss? Somebody else likes Venture Sky. That was the weather program we were using there. Some holes in the overcast clouds. Yeah, I think that's our best chance right now. If they can find a little hole where they can launch in between cloud cover, that will be great. Let's see. Sorry, I cannot do a thumbs up. Let's yet another professional broadcast, aka my go-to site for watching. Well, thanks, Nigel. What kind of fuel do they use? As Trent wants to know on Periscope. So the Crew Dragon capsule will use hypergolic fuels. It's basically a mixture that when it comes in contact, it immediately combusts. They don't need an ignition source or an ignition of any sort. Basically, they just have their oxidizer and their propellant, and they're stored in high pressure COPV containers. So that's composite overwrapped pressure vessels. And they're under high pressure, and they will, when the abort triggers today, they open up those pressure lines, throw the fuel into the combustion chamber, and as soon as it comes in contact, it comes up to full thrust almost immediately. I mean, there's a brief window of thrust buildup, but pretty much, for all intents and purposes, it's almost immediately full thrust. The booster uses rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen. which is not hypergolic. You can throw them into the same combustion chamber and they're not going to actually ignite unless you have an ignition source. So that's what the actual booster uses. And the booster today will be fully fueled. So the first stage will be fully fueled, just like as if it was going to go to the International Space Station. The second stage, even though it's not being used, will be fully fueled with all rocket grade kerosene, the helium, the liquid oxygen. It'll have everything in there. The only thing the second stage does not have is an actual engine, because that's expensive and there's no reason to just destroy an engine. But they do have a mass simulator in there, which is basically like a hunk of concrete or something like that, that just simulates the mass of the engine being there. So that they can have all the parameters right when they're doing the abort for all the stresses and forces that the rocket's going to feel. So no second stage engine, but it will be fully fueled. The whole rocket will be fully fueled. The other thing, I guess I should say fully fueled asterisks, and that's because there's no TEA-TEB on board for performing like a landing of some sort. So they use the TEA-TEB for igniting the booster to start with, but they're not keeping enough on board to do some sort of landing. So that first stage booster, no chance, zero chance that first stage booster survives. First of all, it's once that Crew Dragon capsule comes off the front of it, the top of that rocket is basically just a giant air scoop. I mean, you got the inner stage that's just a hole at the top of the rocket. It's covered by the Crew Dragon capsule. Crew Dragon's going to come off and it's going to be just a giant hole that's just scooping air in at like Mach 4 or something like that. I forget what speed it's going to, I think it's like Mach 1.8 actually. But it's going to be pulling in air like crazy. I mean, I suspect it's going to break up almost immediately, especially that at least the interstage is going to break up immediately, just from the forces of the air there. And you got to remember, this is going to happen at max Q, which is usually around like 40,000 feet or so, 40,000 feet. And there's still a lot of atmosphere there, and it's going to be going quite fast. So there's going to be a lot of stress on that rocket once it goes away. Oh, SpaceX broadcast is going live. This is good news. This is great news. Let's see, we'll put it up here. I'm just gonna put it behind me so you guys can see it. And we're gonna keep talking here for just a few minutes here. So, but anyways, once it separates, it's pretty much just gonna break up. Whether we have a fireball or not, I don't know the answer to that. I suspect, if you saw my video, my feeling is it's not gonna be a giant fireball. I think it's just gonna break up and kind of just come apart in pieces. But I hope I'm wrong, because a giant fireball would be awesome. That's just kind of my feeling. The interesting thing about all of this is that it really just takes a tiny ignition source, any sort of spark or metal on metal like that just sparks a little bit, and you could get a giant fireball. So it's possible you could get a giant fireball here, but we're gonna have to see. Let's see, what else did I miss here? No, so I say fully fueled, 84 seconds. Would you get that? Yeah. Also this booster that's launching, the Block 5 booster, another reason why it's not going to be recovered. There's no landing legs, there's no grid fins, there's no TEA-TEB to reignite the engine, so it can't even soft touchdown in the water. There's nothing on board for it to slow down. So it's going to just crash into the water if it doesn't break up in the air. I suspect it's going to break up into a million pieces before it gets that far, but let's say for some reason it survives that. It's still going to belly flop into the ocean at like 300 miles per hour or something like that, because there's nothing to slow it down. Yeah, I think we pretty much covered most of the stuff that I wanted to get to, but I do want to show before SpaceX goes live here, we'll show this real quick, which is the animation of what's going to happen today. Let's see, we want this screen here real quick. We'll go through this just so that we can see. This is only a quick like 1 minute animation here so you can see what's happening. But we're launching from Cape Canaveral today. This is launch pad 39A, which is where crew will launch from future missions. It's going to launch. It's going to go about 84 seconds into launch here. So it's about 1 minute and 26 seconds. Then it will separate the crew capsule. First stage will break up from the aerodynamic forces. Once it gets to apogee, highest point in its suborbital trajectory, it'll separate that trunk. It'll turn around. It'll get the drogue parachutes out, and then the mains will come out. It will splash down in the ocean, hopefully nice and soft and safely. And then there are a whole bunch of recovery ships out there, one of which is, I think it's Go Searcher. That's the ship that's depicted in the animation there, that will go out and pick up the Crew Dragon capsule. But there are also there's a bunch of Air Force ships that are out there and a bunch of other support ships that are going to be out there as well to pick up the debris. They're expecting a lot of debris out there. So they're part of the environmental assessment was basically they think that most of it is going to sink, but anything that doesn't sink, they're going to spend the next 8 hours to try to pick up any debris that's floating. So let's see. Somebody said. Andrew said, can you say hi to Oscar, River, and Lincoln, who's watching their first ever launch on YouTube? First ever launch. This is an exciting launch to watch for the first time. This is going to be, hopefully we can see it all, but hello to Oscar, River, and Lincoln. Thanks for watching and checking out the first ever launch. Let me know if anybody else is a first timer here, either first time to the channel or first time to a launch. That's fantastic. This is a good one to get into because this is exciting. Well, it's going to be exciting because you're going to see the first stage. Hopefully we'll see it. With the cloud cover won't be too bad. And we'll see the first stage break up, which would be kind of cool to see. But this is also exciting because this is the last milestone before SpaceX puts crew on board and starts launching astronauts. It's been a long time since we've launched astronauts from the U.S. We haven't done it since 2011 when the space shuttle ended. So we will, looks like they're going to go live here. So we're going to switch over here. But it's exciting. If everything goes well, then the earliest that crew will be on board, I believe, is like early March, which is not that far away. But that would be the next major milestone. So if everything goes well today and there's no major issues, we could potentially see astronauts launching on board the Crew Dragon capsule to the International Space Station. That's Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley would be launching as early March. I mean, it could be later than that, but we'll see. All right, let's listen in.
Sunday, 19th of January, and we are awaiting SpaceX's launch escape test in just under 17 minutes and 8 seconds. Okay. The test today is to demonstrate the effectiveness of our launch escape system. Now we are currently go for launch from pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center at 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Isberger, Falcon Principal Integration Engineer here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California.
And I'm Marie Lewis with NASA Public Affairs. The purpose of today's test is to demonstrate Crew Dragon's ability to safely fly astronauts away from danger and separate from the Falcon 9 rocket during an in-flight emergency. Now, SpaceX's launch escape system is a first of its kind with its 8 SuperDraco thrusters built directly into Dragon to push the spacecraft away from Falcon 9 in case of an emergency. You can think of it as a rocket on top of a rocket.
Now, in order to test our launch escape system, which is integral to the Dragon spacecraft you see in front of you on the video, we will be simulating an emergency with Falcon 9 at about 84 seconds into flight. This could be a few seconds early or late, as Dragon waits for Falcon 9 to reach a specific velocity before initiating the escape. Now, before Dragon separates and fires its SuperDraco engines, it will command Falcon 9 to shut down its engines as part of the escape sequence. Because Falcon 9 is then unpowered, we are expecting the launch vehicle to fully break up at some point, which should create some particularly interesting views.
For sure.
Now, it's not every day you get to see something like that, so we're going to do our best to bring it to you live as it happens. But a reminder, with the weather and the clouds, we're going to try to find the views that are best. And to be very clear, this is all part of today's test. Within the context of this test, the views that you will see will allow us to validate the effectiveness of our launch escape system.
And we're hoping for some very exciting views, but the whole point of the test today is the next step in our multi-year efforts to fly astronauts again from U.S. soil. It's part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program, and it's a partnership we have with SpaceX and Boeing. But this is not the first time we are putting Dragon's launch escape system to the test. If you remember, back in 2015, SpaceX's pad abort test demonstrated Dragon's ability to escape from the Falcon 9 in the event of an emergency on the pad before liftoff. And the SuperDracos in the launch escape system on today's Dragon capsule you see there were successfully static fired this past November.
And in addition to the test that you just mentioned, SpaceX also flew a full uncrewed demonstration mission to and from the International Space Station last year with its Crew Dragon vehicle. Now, this was a full end-to-end test of the entire Crew Dragon system, validating that our upgraded Crew Dragon spacecraft could safely dock with the space station. And in addition, our team has conducted over 700 tests on just the SuperDraco system alone. Really looking forward to seeing those perform in today's flight.
Absolutely. And if all goes well today, the next big milestone will be to launch astronauts, as we mentioned, to the International Space Station. That's part of what we call Demo 2 or Demonstration Mission 2.
Now we're currently just inside of T-minus 13 minutes and 45 seconds and counting down. Now, weather's been a watch item the last couple of days with rough seas, sustained winds in the recovery area. We had to scrub yesterday. We're also still listening. They're evaluating constantly the weather in the splashdown area right now as we're doing the webcast. Now, we do have a 6-hour window today in case we need to wait for better weather or less cloud cover. We've obviously used 2.5 hours of it already, but right now we think this is our best opportunity. Now, if the weather does not cooperate today, we are preserving tomorrow as a potential backup. Now, as a reminder again, this is not a typical launch. We're purposely testing Dragon's escape system under the most extreme conditions. So while we want everything to go right today, we are prepared if everything goes wrong.
And if that does happen, that's the whole point. This is exactly why we test. We want to see if there's any potential issues, and we want them to happen now so we can address those before we put astronauts on board. And speaking of astronauts, we have NASA's Darrell Nail at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. That's where the test is taking place this morning. And he has more about what those very first astronauts assigned to fly Crew Dragon will be paying special attention to this morning. Darrell?
Yeah, good morning, John and Marie. It's a pretty nice day here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. You can see behind us here on the lawn, some of the media have gathered to shoot this launch. And of course, the countdown clock, the iconic one, they're counting 12 minutes until launch. As you mentioned, the first crew members assigned to fly Crew Dragon are NASA astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken. And they have the most, you could say, invested in the outcome of this test flight. Right now, they are just a few miles away from Launch Pad 39A, which is just behind my left shoulder here. They're in the SpaceX firing room inside the Launch Control Center, where they will closely monitor today's flight abort test. Now, right now, they've been training up until this point, training hard with NASA and SpaceX so they can understand every aspect of Dragon's systems, their spacesuits, and how to respond in a variety of potential emergency scenarios, including an escape from a Falcon 9 rocket in the middle of flight. The end result of that could be an early splashdown in the Atlantic Ocean. Now, both astronauts told us what they will specifically be looking for during today's test flight.
I think both of us are really excited that the in-flight abort test is about to happen. You know, we kind of view that as the graduation exercise like a lot of folks do on the NASA side to make sure that we're really confident that we've got a good plan and good procedures in place for pulling that mission off. And so I'm excited that we're this far, and I know once it's behind us, you know, we'll be the prime Falcon 9 Crew Dragon crew.
What we want to see from this test is just an end-to-end success. So, you know, another successful launch of the Falcon 9 and then to see the SuperDracos work.
I think that's a really good point. I think getting the NASA team and the SpaceX team on the same page kind of going forward and kind of walking through all the decisions that you have to make for getting ready for this flight, I think is a big milestone as well, because it's the last launch associated with us before we ride that rocket.
Yeah, that's very true. It is. It's
gonna be so nerve-wracking.
Final exam, so there's a lot riding on it, but also I think it's a culmination of a ton of work from everybody in NASA and SpaceX to get to this point.
I'm just really proud that the team is trying to pull off something so critical from a safety perspective. You know, if we needed to escape off of the rocket, to have that system demoed before we would actually use it is pretty cool that folks are making the investment to make that happen.
We feel really excited about kind of the progress that SpaceX and NASA have made to this point, and this kind of shows us that we're getting really close to our flight. So to see all these capabilities all put together, all the teams together, and to be able to launch this vehicle, it's just a huge boost of confidence.
Now, there's an interesting human side to Doug and Bob's story. They're not just crewmates, but they're also friends who have spent a lot of time together over the years. Both graduated from the same astronaut training class in 2000. Both flew on the space shuttle. Both are married to astronauts, and they were in each other's wedding. John and Marie, back to you.
All right, thanks, Daryl. You're taking a live look now. This is inside SpaceX's firing room 4. That's where Bob and Doug are sitting today, along with the NASA and SpaceX teams, following along today's test. And this past Friday, they completed what we refer to internally as a dry dress rehearsal. We saw some video of that during Daryl's segment. This is where the astronauts, along with the SpaceX and NASA teams, walk through those steps that they'll take before they get on board for Demo 2. We saw them suit up, and that is really exciting stuff, especially that was the first time we saw them suited up walking out of the astronaut suit-up room, and so really looking forward to doing that for Demo 2. Let's take a quick look now at Crew Dragon. It stands almost 27 feet tall from the bottom of the trunk to the top of the nose cone. And Crew Dragon is composed of 2 main elements. The capsule, that top portion, is designed to hold crew and pressurized cargo, and it has an unpressurized section known as the trunk that's down below. For today's test, much of the exciting work is going to be done by the Dragon's 8 SuperDraco engines we talked about, built directly into the capsule.
Now, to give you a sense of power, when fired together, the 8 SuperDracos can move the spacecraft a half a mile in 7.5 seconds. So from a standing start, the SuperDracos accelerate the spacecraft to a speed of 436 miles per hour. That's a lot faster than a catapult launch from an aircraft carrier.
I know, and it's hard to imagine just moving that fast. I was trying to get a feel for it, so I did a little math, and it's about 3 times faster than takeoff on a commercial plane, if you can imagine that. In fact, one jetpack assembly, which consists of 2 SuperDracos, produces more thrust than an F-16 fighter jet at full afterburn. So, John, if you were to put that, strap that to your back, you would break the sound barrier in under half a second. Not sure you'd want to volunteer for that.
I'd probably break something else, too. So that gets us through the major test objective today, Dragon separating from the Falcon. Several minutes later, we will deploy drogue parachutes, followed by the 4 large main parachutes. You'll see the main parachutes partially open at first if we've got video, then fully open. These will then control the descent of the Dragon capsule softly into the Atlantic Ocean.
And while that vehicle that you see on the pad looks like a typical Crew Dragon spacecraft from the outside, if you had a look inside, you'll see that the interiors have been stripped down, and there it is. We do have a look inside for you.
That's interesting.
The cabin has no interior panels except for one on the ceiling, and there's no control panel in there for this test. Dragon's also outfitted with 2 seats that you see there, and sitting inside those seats, we have 2 anthropomorphic test devices.
What, no cool acronym? I'll just call them test devices.
We have enough acronyms, John.
While the test devices do not have any sensors on them today, the seats they're sitting on are instrumented. We'll be able to measure the loads on the seat to ensure that there are no unexpected issues in this stressing test case. We've also made some other modifications to the Dragon interior for today's test.
That's right. There will be 3 cargo racks with some assortment of ballast or cargo bags and no floor. Now, below where the floor would be, there will be an assortment of mass simulators in place of the life support components and some other equipment that's down there when we have crew aboard.
Now, the test today will look a lot like a normal Falcon launch for the first minute and a half. We'll fly until Falcon 9 reaches a predetermined velocity. This will occur about 84 seconds into flight, and that happens at approximately 20 kilometers up. Once we reach the required velocity, Dragon will then trigger an escape. Now, as a reminder, the ground is not commanding this abort. It's up to the onboard computers to determine when to trigger the launch escape and do all the functions afterward. Once Dragon does trigger the launch escape, the first event will be commanding Falcon 9 to shut down its 9 Merlin engines. Now, as Marie and I mentioned earlier, Dragon will then separate from the Falcon using its 8 SuperDraco engines, firing for about 8 seconds. That carries Dragon capsule with the trunk up and away from Falcon. Now, once they finish firing the SuperDracos, we coast, we jettison the trunk at apogee, we reorient the capsule to come back for entry into the Earth's atmosphere. We deploy about 2 minutes after apogee, the drogue chutes, and about a minute after that, the 4 main parachutes will be released. Dragon will then splash down softly in the Atlantic Ocean, about 35 kilometers offshore. Now, when Dragon separates, we no longer have that smooth aerodynamic shape on top of the rocket. So the supersonic Falcon is going to be exposed to strong aerodynamic forces in the upper atmosphere. So we expect those aerodynamic forces will cause Falcon to start to tumble. Our simulations show that the Falcon will likely break apart due to the tumbling, instead of having the destruct system triggered and destroying the rocket. So now again, this entire test will take less than 10 minutes from the time Falcon 9 lifts off until Dragon splashes down. But Marie, once we splash down, the work's not over yet.
Right, it's just beginning for the recovery team. We have a lot of things happening very rapidly in that first 10 minutes, and the recovery operation takes quite a bit longer. It'll be similar to the pad abort test, but it will happen slightly farther down range in the Atlantic Ocean. So after splashdown, recovery teams will already be standing by for range approval to enter and clear that hazardous area. And if all goes nominally, SpaceX could have fully recovered Dragon back onto its recovery ship approximately 2 hours after splashdown. Keep in mind, though, if this were to happen during an actual flight with crew on board, rescuing them would be the #1 objective, of course, and recovering Dragon would be a secondary operation. So if that were to happen, an elite military rescue team would deploy at a moment's notice. They're part of the U.S. Air Force's Detachment 3, or they have this really great nickname, the Guardian Angels, which is very appropriate. They would jump from military aircraft. There's a photo of that happening there, where they would deploy their own parachutes to gently reach the water, and from there they would help the crew out of the capsule and then onto a life raft to wait for a larger ship. Now, this is not just any life raft. It has a cover that they can put over the top to protect them from the elements, and it's also equipped with food, water, and medical supplies, enough to last for days if needed. This would be, of course, a worst-case scenario. It's one that we don't expect to happen.
That would be awful.
But, of course, what do we do when we're preparing to fly crew? We always plan for the worst. So this is something that NASA, SpaceX, and the Department of Defense have rehearsed together over and over so that we're ready for anything.
And the SpaceX recovery team is also keeping an eye out for Falcon 9. As we mentioned earlier, Falcon 9 is expected to break up over the water. We've got a dedicated team of SpaceX recovery personnel who will be staged and ready to begin recovering debris shortly after breakup. Well, the clock's kicking down rapidly. We're just over T-minus 2 minutes and 14 seconds from liftoff. You've seen the crew access arm. It's back. That was retracted away from Dragon at T-minus 42 minutes. A few minutes after that, Dragon launch escape system was armed just before we began loading propellant onto the Falcon 9. So if an unplanned situation arose right now, Dragon would perform an escape. Now currently the engines are chilled in for launch on the Falcon. The Dragon spacecraft is waiting for liftoff. We have retracted, and you can see in the video the strongback is moved away just about 2 degrees in readiness for liftoff. We have also finished loading liquid oxygen onto both the stages, so the Falcon 9 is just about ready. The large white cloud you see coming off of the side, we're venting down the pressure from the liquid oxygen supply lines in the strongback in preparation for launch. The last event you're going to hear
big vent
start
right
up
there.
at 1 minute when the computers take over and the launch director go at 30 seconds.
And we're coming right up on that in about 15 seconds now. We'll be just a minute from liftoff. And Falcon 9 is, as you just heard, is moving into those final stages of the final countdown for the in-flight abort test today. So far, weather's looking okay. We're hoping it's going to continue to cooperate, and the range is green for launch. Now, if for some reason we scrub today, we will shift to our backup launch window, which is tomorrow at the same time. Again, this is just a test. We're fully expecting Falcon 9 to break up, so don't be alarmed if you see that happening live. And with that, let's listen in now. We're just 45 seconds from the final countdown.
Oh, all right. We're under a minute here. Getting to be 30 seconds. We're going to hopefully hear the launch director call go for launch here, like right now.
This is armed. Go for launch.
Go for launch. Ah! That means they're good for weather. So we should be going here. 2 anthropomorphic test devices or test dummies on board. Oh, I'm so excited.
Minus 15 seconds.
Got like sweaty palms. Oh, I'm so pumped.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition, liftoff. Simplify, aim high. Go Falcon, go Dragon.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Stay with propulsion stuff.
T plus 30 seconds. Falcon 9 with the Crew Dragon capsule is heading east from pad 39A. Everything looking good right now. As we get ready for max dynamic pressure, we are now throttling down the first stage engines on the Falcon
power
9.
and telemetry nominal.
Don't forget, this is only going to last 84 seconds, so like a minute.
Everything continues to look good.
26 seconds.
We're approaching the period of maximum dynamic pressure.
Vehicle is supersonic and passing through maximum dynamic pressure.
There's
You've
max
heard
Q.
we're supersonic. We're through max Q. We're getting ready now to throttle the engines back up on the first stage.
Stage 1, throttle up.
There's the call out. Okay, the major activity coming up in just over 10 seconds. Shutdown and Dragon escape from the Falcon 9.
Right here. Here it is.
Miko, Dragon launch escape initiated.
Yes.
Dragon's away.
And you can hear some really loud cheering in the room. Okay, you just saw a bright flash there. It looks like that may be Falcon 9 breaking up. We've got some loud cheers here in Hawthorne. The folks that just watched live the Dragon separate. The next milestone we have coming up at 2 minutes, 25 seconds, we're expecting to see the trunk jettison. So that claw that connects the trunk to the capsule is going to separate, allowing Dragon to separate from the trunk.
I guess
it's coming up in 15 seconds.
I was definitely wrong about the Falcon 9 booster.
And we
That
do
was definitely
have
a boom.
report. Loss of telemetry from Falcon 9, first stage.
It's okay though. Don't freak out. That was expected. There goes the trunk. So that's apogee.
And there you just saw the trunk jettison again. Some really loud cheers here in Hawthorne, California. This test is looking great so far.
Nice view from the back of the Dragon capsule. We're also trying to see if we get the view there on the right-hand side from the aircraft that's orbiting the area. Now the Dragon control system is now going to be reorienting the capsule. We're at a high altitude where the aerodynamics are negligible. So we're going to use the small Draco thrusters on the Dragon capsule to reorient it. That gets it in a position with a heat shield down to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere, and then later to deploy the drogue parachutes.
Now those drogue chutes, we expect to get confirmation that those have deployed at T plus 4 minutes and 48 seconds. So we've got just a little bit of breathing room before we hear that happen.
That was a cool
Those
looking.
parachutes are protected during ascent, on orbit, and re-entry by a panel that's up near the nose cone of the capsule.
Was a pretty cool looking
So
boom.
we're going to jettison the panel, then
Don't worry,
the mortars will
replaying
fire
that.
to deploy those 2 drogue chutes. Again, that's coming up in just over a minute at T plus 4 minutes and 48 seconds.
I really hope there's a whole bunch of people there that are taking like super high quality video of this and photos. I really hope there's some amazing photos of that.
When we
I'm
see
sure there
those
are.
come out, those will open. Those will come out before the main parachutes. Those drogue parachutes are what we use to begin to decelerate the Dragon capsule in preparation for splashdown.
We understand we're getting into the drogue deploy envelope on the Dragon capsule.
We expect that will happen when Dragon is at about 20,000 feet.
trying to figure out this heads-up display
About
here.
15 seconds to drogue chute deploy.
Should see the drogues come out any second here. Oh, see the cover come off. There's the drogues.
And there they are. Drogue chutes are out. Again, some major cheering going on here as every stage of this test unfolds. Now we're going to be getting ready for the main chutes to deploy.
Now, main chutes will be coming up fairly quickly. There are 4 main parachutes. These are the newest Mark III parachutes. They're each 116 feet in diameter. We deploy them about 2 kilometers above sea level, 6,500 feet above the Atlantic Ocean. We're getting good views from the Dragon and the airplane, showing the 2 drogue chutes. Now we're just waiting for the main parachutes to be deployed very shortly. And we have the view from a different camera on Dragon showing the 4 main parachutes. Now they are deployed in a reefed condition. That means we're keeping them fairly shut to avoid shocks, and now we're slowly opening up the 4 parachutes.
Yeah, you'll see them
Great views coming off of the Dragon camera on the left, and we can also see the 4 parachutes from the airplane on the right.
That is a really cool view.
Nice view of the orange and white parachutes as they're opening up into the 2nd position. And then going to fully open. From fully open, we'll be descending about 20 to 25 feet per second down to the Atlantic. So from that 6,500 foot altitude, it's going to take us a few minutes to splash down. Also right now that the mains are out, a sequence is performed on the Dragon, which will reorient the crew seats into a splashdown position, give them a little better angle to take the slow bounce as we hit the ocean. Now, Marie, I talked about the parachutes came out initially at a reef condition. That's fairly standard. They come out not fully open. That way they're minimizing the shock on the parachutes. We're also minimizing the shock on the capsule. Again, we want to give a smooth ride to the crew as they are coming back through the Earth's atmosphere.
Right.
Now, the parachutes are located behind a door that's at the bottom of the capsule. It's below the crew hatch. So Dragon commands the door to release, and as you saw in the video, the drogue parachutes pull the door away, and that pulls the 4 main parachutes out. Now, these are the new Mark III parachutes. We've completed here at SpaceX over 80 tests of that parachute system, including 10 multi-parachute tests of this particular upgraded parachute design over the last few months to demonstrate that the design is ready for flight.
And we're just inside 2 minutes of when we expect to see splashdown. The recovery teams are already out there in the Atlantic Ocean standing by, ready with fast boats to begin their initial approach to Dragon. Again, we mentioned this before, but the recovery operation we expect to take a couple of hours.
I've heard a call out, we're below 500 meters.
And we expect when Dragon splashes down, it's going to be roughly 32 kilometers offshore.
Hard to tell how far
Again,
away the water is there.
But so far, all things have appeared to go nominal for this test. All things looking great so far. We saw the 4 main parachutes deploy. You're looking at them now, fully open. And we are coming up on about a minute until splashdown.
I think we may have heard a call out of 100 meters to go.
Yeah, I just heard that too.
Yep.
Always makes me nervous, these parachutes like crashing into each other like that, but it's supposed to happen, expected to happen.
Now those 4 parachutes are actually going to be released from the capsule after splashdown,
like
and will be recovered too.
Yeah!
And we are down.
Down a little bit early, in fact.
There's the fast boat.
And there you can see the recovery boat beginning to approach instantly. I'm going to try to talk a little bit louder so you can hear me over the folks here. This has been a really exciting thing to see because we had the weather We weren't really sure if the weather was going to cooperate. We were trying to weigh, is it favorable for launch, but also is it favorable for recovery, because they really have to watch the height of those waves in order to do this operation. That fast boat is just off screen now, but there's 4 fast boats out there in the area to begin, again, that initial approach to Dragon. The recovery operation from here takes about 2 hours, but all in all, this looked like a really great test.
Yeah, a lot of fun watching the Dragon come down. We had great views from the onboard camera in particular. Now I think this camera is from our Go Searcher recovery ship, which is also the tender for the fast boats. You saw one of them headed out there. And you can also see it looks still a little choppy, so you understand we were kind of on the edge of the weather conditions out in the splashdown area. But they assessed the boat data, the buoy data, looked at the forecast and said we were go. And while we took 2.5 hours to get here, we finally got here and it was great. And that's the summary for today. It looks like right now a great test. Visually, everything happened. Falcon 9, you saw the liftoff. We had kind of a long view from the camera. Dragon did shut down the 9 Merlin 1D engines and separate. We did see the flash as the Falcon 9 came apart, as predicted. No surprise there. Dragon, we saw a great view as it got to apogee. It deployed the trunk, separating it, reoriented. Then the drogue chutes came out, the main chutes came out, and then we just waited for that nice soft splashdown in the Atlantic Ocean.
And we saw, and it looks like we just lost the view from out there on the ship, but you couldn't really see much from that particular angle. Again, that recovery operation is going to take a couple of hours, so we're not going to stay on the air for the duration of that. But we are going to be back for a news conference coming up at 11:30 Eastern time this morning. That would be, let me do the math real quick, 8:30 Pacific time. We're going to hear from NASA and SpaceX leaders about their initial thoughts on this test that you just saw. Of course, everything looked fantastic, but there's going to be a lot of data to dig into. They're going to also collect those parachutes, get a lot of data from that, and then see what the next steps are on the path to Demo 2, when, of course, we're going to be launching NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. So stay tuned for that news conference. It will be carried live on NASA TV. If you're watching on the web, just tune to nasa.gov/live so you can see that coverage. Again, that's 8:30 Pacific time, 11:30 Eastern. Thanks so much for joining us for this morning's test.
All right, well, that's going to do it for SpaceX, and I guess we're going to stick around for a little while because we are definitely going to be watching that. We're going to watch that over again for sure. That was awesome. That was about, I don't know, that's pretty much as good as you could hope for, as far as I could tell. I mean, my untrained eye here, that was awesome. There was a big boom, so I was wrong. I was hoping to be wrong, and it definitely went kaboom, which was kind of awesome. But more importantly, the Dragon capsule separated, from what I can tell, perfectly. Trunk separated, drogues came out, main parachutes came out. They all worked well. That was awesome. It's pretty much as good as you could get here. I mean, we should probably replay that, right? Just let me take a look at a couple comments here, because we haven't talked in a while, because I really didn't want to interrupt the broadcast. But yeah, Falcon went boom, boom. Yeah, for sure. I think the Space Lobster caught up to it. Space Lobster still causing problems. I like these anxious jitters just before launch. I know I was so nervous going into it. Like just wanted everything to go right. But yeah, we're gonna replay that here in just a second. I just wanted to see. Yeah, we had a view from inside the capsule. So it was a stripped down version inside the capsule. They didn't completely outfit the inside. They did have 2 anthropomorphic test devices or test dummies. I was hoping they were going to give them names, but they didn't give them names. But those were on board. Surprisingly, though, the test dummies themselves didn't have sensors on them. They said there were only sensors on the seats to measure the loads and stuff like that. So I assumed that the test devices or test dummies would actually have sensors on them like Ripley did, but they did not. They did have cargo in it. They had the floor was out, but they had a bunch of cargo in there to simulate some of the weight shifting around and things like that. So Oh, and something else I found interesting as during the lead up there too is that all in the firing room for SpaceX, everybody was facing out the window, which is a little bit different from like the Apollo and the shuttle era. They had a lot of the controllers in the launch in the firing rooms facing away from the windows, so that they would be focused on their screens and not looking up at the launch that was taking place. But did find it interesting that SpaceX firing room was facing out the windows. I wanted to try to get a chance to say that, and couldn't get in, but yeah. So basically, at this point, they'll go analyze the Crew Dragon capsule, the parachutes. They'll look at the video data, all the test data, and then it seems like this was a success, and they'll be able to move on to crewed missions as early as early March. I mean, there's always a chance that could slip still, but that's probably the earliest that could happen would be early March. So that is super, super exciting. Let's see what else. Looks like it's a go for manned Dragon launch in March. This test was crucial. Yeah, definitely, and that pretty much proved that it was a success here. Short, sweet, to the point. Even let's see, the explosion was awesome. Yeah, we need to replay that for sure. Rocket exploded. The astronauts would have survived. That's awesome. That's exactly what they need. Did they use the self-destruct on Falcon 9? They did not. So they did not use the flight termination system, or the AFTS, the automated flight termination system. So that explosion that we saw was not from the flight termination system. That was purely from aerodynamic forces. That was not the flight termination system there. They had no plans to use the flight termination system for a nominal mission, although the flight termination system was armed in case something happened outside of the mission plan. So if the Falcon 9 started going off course, flight termination system would have kicked in. If something happened that didn't go according to plan, it still would have used flight termination system. But that explosion we saw was not from the flight termination system. That was just aerodynamic forces. The lobster is at home with the fishes now. I like that, Tom. Alex says, like the video. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. If you like this kind of stuff, make sure like the video, maybe subscribe. It helps out. It lets me know, that you like what's going on. Plus, we're closing in on 10,000 subscribers. We're getting close. We're almost there. Let's see. Did the rocket destruct on its own, or did they initiate? Yeah, so that was aerodynamic forces. Just the flight termination or self-destruct was not used. Missed the tumbling. Looked like it was going to be straight. Need to see. Yeah, we're going to go a replay here. Missed it due to the internet connection. Let's see. Everybody say, just shut up and go to the replay. All right, let's go to replay. We got to see that over again. Let's see. How do I get back to replay? That's 6 minutes. That's 2 minutes. Back it up. Okay, here we go. It was quick. We can just go. We'll go right back to. We can just go right back here. I'm gonna keep the. Let's see. I'm gonna keep the sound off, and we can talk through it at this point because we heard it once through the SpaceX broadcast, but. We'll listen again here. Let me move myself out of the way here. Let's see. How do I? 11, 10. I need to move over here so I'm out of the way of the altitude readings. So I'll do that so you can see the altitude readings there. But yeah, perfectly nominal launch there itself. I suppose you could probably turn it up a little bit. You can hear the actual launch going.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Turn on our replay text as well. All right, so there we go. We got the launch sounds over with, but yeah, quick mission, real quick, and it sounds like a lot of the photographers couldn't actually see the breakup because of the cloud cover. So you see just a few seconds after launch, like right here, it starts going through clouds. It sounds like a lot of the photographers, or at least I saw a couple on Twitter already that couldn't see the actual breakup happen, which is a shame. I was hoping that we would get that. Like right here, see it going through the clouds there. They may have made it tough for the people on the ground to see the actual breakup of it. But separation occurred pretty much right on schedule. 1 minute, 26 seconds after launch. That was right on the money of when it was supposed to happen. So you could see right there, we're at 1,700 kilometers per hour, probably close to 2,000 kilometers per hour as it was going right there. There's the abort. You see the thrust termination. And then on the left side, you see the smoke trail there from the Falcon 9. That's the booster on the left side there. And you'll see it. Boom! Look at that. That was way more spectacular than I thought it was going to be. And then you just see there's like pieces of it. There's one fairly large piece, and then I don't know, there's this other like random thing up here. Like back that up. Hold on. Back up. We're watching it again. We're going to look at that again. So there's the thrust termination. You see how quickly the Crew Dragon pulls away. And the Crew Dragon's little white dot, it kind of disappears for a little bit after the SuperDracos shut down. And then boom! Man. That's a break. That broke apart. That's for sure. I don't know what that little piece is. I'll finish it out here in a second. But like that little explosion there was incredible. That was way better. Way better than I thought it was going to be. I was wondering, like, tracking camera-wise, like, are they going to track the Crew Dragon? Were they going to track the booster? Were we going to see the booster? We saw it. And look at it. It survived quite a while after. I thought the breakup would happen faster. And then just boom. That was a big boom. So yeah, I guess I expected the breakup to be much more gradual. I expected the Crew Dragon to come off, pieces start to come flying, and then eventually it would just kind of come all apart. But this, you got to give it up for the, back it up here again. You got to give it up for the Falcon 9 booster. I mean, that Crew Dragon capsule pulls away, and it no longer has the protection from the Crew Dragon capsule, yet it's still holding strong for a good couple of seconds with no Crew Dragon capsule on top, which is incredible. I wish we had a closer view of the booster. Hopefully one of the photographers or videographers that are down there, hopefully somebody was able to track it and actually keep a close eye on the Falcon 9 booster, because I want to know exactly like how the breakup went down. Like, because you see there's no pieces or anything coming off. You do get that white smoke trail, which is probably just the engines after cutoff there. Maybe even liquid oxygen streaming out. And then boom, that could be liquid oxygen streaming out, like right after you get separation. Maybe the liquid oxygen tank, like right here, that could be liquid oxygen streaming out that you're seeing right there. And it's already structurally compromised. And then just all of a sudden, there's the RP1 tank structurally compromised, mixing with the liquid oxygen, and you get the big boom. That could be. I don't know for sure, but that's a possibility. That's incredible, right? Let's see, better than the Death Star explosion. I like that. I'm impressed at how long it actually took from separation to breakup. I kind of expected breakup to be I expected breakup right there. Probably better that it didn't break up right there, but because that was a big boom. I mean, the Crew Dragon capsule would still be able to pull it away from there, but like, boom, look at that. And then you see, like, you got this one random piece up here that's just streaming forever. And then I guess this is the bulk of the booster here that's whatever's left. All right, I'll let this play out here for a second. We'll see. Let me see what you guys think. Let me know what you guys thought of that. What my thoughts were. You tell me what your thoughts were seeing that. So, let's see. Yep, with no nose cone, the forces are chewing a hole through it. Yeah, it seems like, and that's why I was hoping for a little closer view of the actual of the Falcon 9 booster, because I wanted to see, like, did it come apart like from the inside out? Did the air punch through the inside of the inner stage and it kind of came inside out, or did it did it break apart outside in? I don't know. I'm just curious about that. Let's see. Is that supposed to happen? Yes, that was supposed to happen. That was completely expected because the test today was to test the Crew Dragon capsule pulling away from the booster. And once the Crew Dragon pulled away from the booster is no longer structurally sound. Like it's got no aerodynamic protection. There's no nice soft aerodynamic nose cone over the top of the booster, and so it's going 2,000 kilometers per hour, and it's just plowing through the air and just gets ripped apart. So completely expected. Let's see. Tank ruptured on top. That's Brian's guess. Let's see. That blew itself up or something. Yeah, it basically ripped itself apart from the aerodynamic forces. Just to reiterate, that was the flight termination system, which is like the self-destruct of the Falcon 9 booster, was not used here. Let's see. Still as exciting as the first time. I know, right? Nice to see so many people watching. Yeah, well, I do appreciate everybody tuning in here. So I was excited for this. I was expecting a lot of people tuning in and excited for this because this was an exciting event. Let's see. We need high resolution slow motion of the explosion. I know. I'm really hoping. It looks like SpaceX doesn't have it, or at least they haven't shared it yet. There's always the possibility. SpaceX does this quite frequently. They may have another tracking camera that just wasn't on the live broadcast that they may put out later. That would be awesome if they do. Let's see. Come on with the replay already. I know. Everybody wanted to see the replay. The octaweb is what's left. That could be. That's pretty. That's a pretty solid structure there. That could be the octaweb that was left over. The octaweb, in case you're not curious, is basically the harness at the bottom of the Falcon 9 booster that holds the engines in place. So it's super strong structurally to handle all the boosters or all the engines igniting. Let's see. Looked more like a detonation than anything else. It did look like a detonation, but it was not. This was not. Unless something didn't go according to plan, but the plan was not to use the flight termination system even after it separated. So I'm fairly certain that was not the flight termination system. That was just purely from aerodynamic forces. Let's see. Don't smoke around oxygen. Yeah, right. I'm curious to see if the intensity of the explosion was meant to be a little less than what we saw. That was epic. We were glad the capsule landed and all, SpaceX, but we sure like explosions. Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah, so let's see. What was I going to say? That's what it was. Curious to see if the intensity of the explosion was meant to be a little less than what we saw. I don't think anybody really knew exactly how that explosion was going to play out, because there were a lot of people, myself included, that thought it would just kind of break apart nice and easy, like maybe CRS-7 did. That broke apart, and there was streaming liquid oxygen and kerosene and everything coming out of it, but it wasn't a big boom. It just kind of ripped apart. But there were a lot of people that were on the other side saying, no, this is going to be a big boom. And turns out they were right. I was wrong, because that was a big boom. We're going to watch it again, don't worry, because that was awesome. But yeah, that was a big boom, and that was, so I guess as far as was the intensity as strong as expected, I don't think there was an expectation. I think it was basically like, we're going to launch this, we're going to pull the Crew Dragon capsule away, and whatever happens to the Falcon 9 happens. I mean, basically, they were planning for a big explosion and it being ripped apart into a million pieces. I mean, they cleared the area. They had a debris field mapped out that was basically like, worst case scenario, if this thing explodes with extreme intensity, this is where all the debris is going to go. And so the plan was worst case scenario, but as far as what was what the actual realistic expectation was, I don't think they really knew. I'm sure somebody at SpaceX probably knew a little bit more. I mean, they probably ran simulations to this a little more, but they, they weren't trying to control the explosion portion. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that there was no effort made to control or contain the explosion of the first stage booster. It was like, we're just going to load this like we would a normal flight. We're going to abort like if this was a normal flight and there was some sort of anomaly, we want to abort like that. And then whatever happens, happens at that point. Priority one, make sure the astronauts are safe and they can safely land. And then, if you get a spectacular explosion, great. If you don't, great. As long as the astronauts could be pulled away safely. So, Gia, thanks for the donations, for the tip there. Gia says, thank you for this coverage. # Space Lobster. I like to see that you're still on the Space Lobster inner circle. Thank you very much, Gia. I appreciate it. It helps our mission here and helps us keep going with stuff like this. We're going to try to upgrade some equipment. I do have some plans for the next year here. They're probably going to be slow going, but just in case people are curious about what's going on with the channel, we're trying to get, ideally, I don't know if this is going to happen, but we're trying to get a proper studio set up. Might be kind of slow going, but trying to get that set up to do a little more like polished videos, and maybe I could bring this whole live streaming setup into the new studio. We'll see how that plans out. We got plans on paper. Nothing's actually happening yet, but we're trying to push forward with that. Anyways, let's see. So yeah, thanks again, Gia. I want to make sure to say that as well. Appreciate the tip there. First Man Dragon is scheduled for March. Can't wait. Yeah, I think one thing that I would note as an important note there is that March timeline is no earlier than March. So it's still possible that could go to April or even May if they don't feel that they're ready. But the March for crewed flight is no earlier than March. So if everything checks out here, we could see crewed flight in early March, but it could be later than that. Just don't get your hopes up too high. I'd love to see it in March, but there's always the chance of delay. All right, we're going to back this up. While I'm still talking, we're going to back this up and watch again. Let's see, for anybody that just tuned in and yeah, okay. So we'll back it up to the launch. I'm going to keep talking, but so you guys can watch this over again, because that was just awesome. So a bunch of people asking. Mary says, can you explain what just happened? Did everything blow up? TV Sykes and Periscope says, was the booster meant to explode? So basically, everything that just happened today, as far as I can tell, happened perfectly and exactly as planned. So everything that we just saw was part of the test and exactly what was supposed to happen. Today's mission was to test what would happen if the Crew Dragon capsule had an anomaly in the middle of flight at the worst possible time. What would happen to the crew? And so what happened to my stream? Frozen. Come back. There we go. So this was to test the worst case scenario. The rocket, my stream is all freaking out. Hold on, let's see. I don't know what's happening to my stream. It's getting low quality. It's skipping and stuttering and going crazy. We're gonna reload this here, because I don't know what's happening. But yeah, basically this was I'm gonna call it a perfect test, the perfect demonstration. Obviously it's a untrained eye evaluation from me. The ultimate evaluation is going to come from SpaceX. But here we go. We got this back up and running here now. But basically, as far as I can tell, everything happened the way it was supposed to. That was interesting transition there. It's not the one I meant to click on, but okay. So YF3 says, "Can you just shut up?" Well, I mean, that's kind of what I'm here for. I mean, you can watch the SpaceX broadcast. You don't want to, if you don't want to hear me talk. There is another broadcast that doesn't have me talking in it. If you're here watching me, this is kind of what I'm here for. Mary says, "Dude, you're very cool. I love listening to you." Thanks, Mary. I appreciate it. So yeah, the intent was, and the plan for today was to launch 1 minute and 26 seconds into launch. They would shut down the thrust of the booster. They would pull the Dragon capsule away from the booster to simulate an anomaly that they have to get the astronauts away from the rocket. That would go on to parachute safely in the ocean, and the rocket would do whatever it would do normally if all of a sudden it had no nose cone anymore. And it was very much expected that if you pull the nose cone off of the rocket while it's traveling 2,000 kilometers per hour, that it will explode. And that is exactly what it did. It just went kaboom. Nobody was really sure, myself included, on like how much it would explode. But it exploded in spectacular fashion. It was a fantastic explosion, if I might say so myself. Nice short mission, but it will. They're going to evaluate and then decide when to put crew on board. I mean, if you're an astronaut, if you're Bob Behnken or Doug Hurley, those are the two astronauts. They're the prime crew. They're the ones that are going to fly as early as March. In my head, those guys got to be looking at this and saying this is exactly what we wanted to see. We were on board. Now, we don't know what the G-forces actually experienced were. They were expected to experience up to 4 Gs, which is relatively soft as far as I was expecting. I mean, I was expecting more like 6, 7, 8 Gs or something like that. But there you go. There's the abort. So this is right on the money to the second when it was supposed to happen. The booster, which is on the left side of the screen that's streaming all that smoke looking out. Boom, big explosion. Completely expected. That's normal. The Crew Dragon is in the middle of the screen. We can't really see it because the SuperDraco engines are no longer firing, so it's really hard to see the Crew Dragon capsule. But it's in the middle of the screen. There's an onboard camera from the Crew Dragon capsule. So that is safe and sound away from the rocket, just like as if there were an anomaly. So we may stick around. I wasn't going to stick around until the NASA news conference, but it's only 25 minutes from now, so I guess we'll stick around and listen to what the news conference is to get the initial evaluation from it. But yeah, the Crew Dragon capsule, safe and sound. We're looking from the capsule down at the trunk. So that big fin that's sticking out, that's part of the trunk, which is the unpressurized section behind the capsule. There it goes. They separate the trunk, get rid of that so that they can orient the crew capsule for recovery. So that the trunk, they just dispose of that. That will smash into the ocean. And then Crew Dragon land safely. So TVCiCap says, so it wasn't detonated remotely. No, it was not. The plan was to let it fly and just let it be ripped apart by aerodynamic forces. So even though that looks like a singular explosion, that was purely just from aerodynamic forces. So John Lennon says, tell that dude to shove it. Your broadcasts are great. Well, thanks, John. I appreciate it. Yeah, that was John's on Facebook commenting about the periscoper that told me to just shut up. Did it reach a point where having the heat shield was crucial in an abort? I don't think this was expected to reach a fast enough velocity where it really needed the heat shield. So generally, this would have been going slow enough where the heat shield wasn't super critical at this point. But the nice thing about this abort system that Crew Dragon has is that they have abort capabilities from prior to launch, anytime on the pad during fueling, all the way to orbit. So they could get to a point if they were further on in the launch procedure where a heat shield is going to be critical. So obviously you're going to need that capability. But I don't think this particular launch the heat shield was super critical. It was more just kind of a nice aerodynamic surface there. So there's Alicia Space Scale over on on Periscope says, I just have to say, OMG, it was amazing. Tori, you should have been here. I know, I was watching everybody that was going to Cape Canaveral. I was really wishing that I went down to Cape Canaveral. I probably should have gone down there. That was pretty cool. But it was still pretty cool to watch remotely. But I'll get down there again. I hope to go down there for another launch in 2020. Usually try to get down for, I don't know, I'm going to try to get down for at least one a year. I don't know when, but yeah, we're going to try to get down there. But yeah, unfortunately I wasn't there for it, but I'm glad you got to see it. That's a Space Gal over on Periscope, who lives down in Cape Canaveral, I think around in Titusville somewhere. Let's see. Mary wants to know how much money it costs to do this. I don't know if they give the exact figure. You know, usually a Falcon 9 launch is like $60 to $90 million. So this launch was covered by the Commercial Crew contract, which was awarded, what was that, way back in like 2014 or something like that, is when the Commercial Crew contract was awarded. So this flight was part of that contract. It was part of the requirements that SpaceX set up for themselves. This is what a lot of people get a little confused about, because Boeing is not doing an in-flight abort test. Boeing opted not to do this. SpaceX said that they wanted to do it. Boeing is going the route of running computer simulations. Now, it's easy to look at it and be like, well, you know, one's a real world demonstration, one is simulations. How can that be considered adequate? But we don't really know what the requirements were from NASA. I'm sure somebody could probably dig it up in the contracts there somewhere, because they should all be public record. But basically, each provider had to demonstrate to NASA that they have confidence that it could operate safely based on the simulations and the tests that they performed. SpaceX opted to do this in-flight abort test, to do a real-world demonstration of it. Boeing opted to do the simulation, and NASA provided in the Commercial Crew program the flexibility for the providers to set the test schedule and the test methods, as long as they were able to conclude and provide documentation and meet the objectives of the Commercial Crew contract. So hope that makes a little bit of sense. But yeah, that's probably the way it should be. If you had NASA in there telling each provider, like, we want you to do exactly, you have to do step 1 and then step 2 and then step 3, and they were micromanaging the whole process, it probably wouldn't be as easily developed. I mean, we'd probably be looking at more of like an SLS type situation where the development is taking forever. The nice thing about that flexibility allowed the development to progress a little bit faster, because each provider could basically, they're managing their own process and then presenting the results to NASA. Now, it's a little more involved than that. NASA is a little more involved, but from a high level perspective, they're not hands off, but I'm going to say hands off from high level perspective. They're kind of backing off and letting the providers do their thing. Will we stay for the press conference? The plan was no, but I think I changed my mind. I think the plan is going to be yes, because the press conference is in like 20 minutes. So yeah, we'll probably stick around for the press conference. Let's see. Okay, making sense to my brain now. During re-entry from orbit, they're all, this apogee was gentle, I get. Yeah, so, I mean, it was still going fast, don't get me wrong, but we're not talking like orbit fast. I mean, this was only, it takes usually like 8 minutes to get to orbit. This abort happened about a minute and a half into flight, so we were not nearly at the velocity for orbit yet. It goes much, much faster than this. So I think that's in a reference to the heat shield question from a few minutes ago. So what we watched was like the inner skeleton of the rocket, makes it more amazing. Also, naked space laps. Well, this was actually, the rocket itself was a fully fueled, like fully configured rocket. The only difference here was that the second stage, and there's splashdown, so we'll back it up, we'll replay it again while we're talking. The only difference here really in the rocket configuration is that they took the engine out of the second stage and replaced it with a mass simulator, basically a hunk of concrete, just to simulate the mass of the engine on board. aside from that, everything else, let's see, we'll back it up here again. Where's our launch? No, we'll back it up here again while we're talking. But aside from the second stage not having an engine and having a mass simulator instead, everything else about the rocket was normal. This was a real Block 5 booster. This was actually kind of unique. This was the first Block 5 booster. This was the first one of the Block 5 configuration. If you're not familiar with what Block 5 configuration is, it's basically when they develop the rockets, they have they're basically like version numbers. They have version 1, version 2, version 3, 4, 5. They didn't call them that, but basically this is Block 5, which is essentially like version 5 of this rocket. They had a previous version. They made some upgrades to it, and Block 5 was intended to fly crew. So this particular booster was the first Block 5 that they ever flew. It flew on Bandhu back in, I want to say May 2018. Is that right? Somebody check that. I'm pretty sure it was May 2018 was Bandhu, which was a satellite launch. First one to use a Block 5 booster. They landed it, recovered it. They flew it again. I think this is I want to say this is the fourth time this booster has flown. The fourth and final. But they, so this was a significant booster because it's already flown at least 2 or 3 times. And they destroyed it this time around. So sorry, I'm just looking at looks like Space Coast Steve on Twitter caught a photo of it, of the actual explosion here. Hold on, we got 3, 2, 1, but I'm gonna switch over before we do that because we want to look at Space Coast Steve is the first. So you got to look up his Twitter handle so I can get it right. He's the first one that I've seen with an actual photo of the RSD, the Rapid Scheduled Disassembly. So let's see. Let's cut over to this screen here. So if you want to follow him on Twitter, it's at SpaceCoast_STVE. He's a photographer that lives down in Cocoa Beach, Florida, that was there. And here's his photo. Just through the cloud, you can see all the clouds kind of in front, the little hazy layers there. We'll have to see if anybody got anything closer than that or any sort of video of that. But definitely give him a follow on Instagram and Twitter because he produces awesome content like this. So that's at Space Coast Steve on Instagram or at SpaceCoast_STVE on Twitter. So awesome, and props to him for capturing an amazing image like this. First one I've seen yet. If anybody else has seen any others, you let me know, and we'll see if we can show them. As long as they're, we want to make sure they're watermarked, and we'll give whoever the person is credit. For the third time, oh sorry, I'm missing a count. For the third time, LOL. Tori, there was a comment about the chutes. Why do they have those markings, and can they get tangled? The ropes look frayed. Are they? No. So I guess I'll see if we can answer a bunch of these, but the ropes are not. They're supposed to look like that. So there's multiple ropes there, and then there's also a disreefing system that kind of clamps the ropes together that gradually comes apart to allow the parachutes to disreef. So they kind of come out in that condensed, here, instead of me just doing hand diagrams, let's just go. So when the mains come out, they stay really condensed like that, and then they gradually disreef, and you can see them coming, they kind of start to pull out a little more like that. So that's pretty normal for what those are supposed to look like. The markings on the parachute, I don't know the exact reason for the markings. That's a great question. I have no idea. I suspect, I don't know. I'm going to throw out some theories. Somebody could correct me. I don't know what the reason is for the markings on there. I'd suspect it was either for like tracking cameras, for visibility purposes, maybe for being able to identify which parachute is which. So it looks like each parachute has its own unique identifier. So if one of them were to fail, you could quickly identify, if you were crew or ground crew or something like that, you could identify which parachute failed or was having an issue or something like that. That's my theory on the markings, but I have no idea. I'd have to. I don't know the answer to that. Can they get tangled? The parachutes themselves have been tested extensively, and I guess the answer is I would say yes and no. Only because my initial thought is no, or my initial answer is no, they can't get tangled. But the only reason I would say that is because they've tested so much and they've designed them not to get tangled. But when you watch this, and they've not gotten tangled ever during any of the testing, and they feel confident that they won't get tangled during testing, but you watch this and you see them all crash around into each other, really makes you nervous. Like, how do they not get tangled? And that's an engineering question that I don't know if SpaceX has really come out and said exactly what's going on. Parachute science is actually like super, super complicated on the... it's probably one of the most complicated things about spaceflight is the parachutes. Everybody, it's got to be like... everybody talks about rocket science being so hard, and parachute science is hard. That should be up there as well. It's when people are like, oh, it's not rocket science, or it is rocket science, or something like that. I mean, parachute science is really hard, just because, especially coming back from orbit, being able to slow this down, taking the shock of the initial deployment, and not just ripping off the spacecraft. So I believe. I probably have to look and see what the actual material is, but I believe that cord that's there, which is why you're seeing some of the fraying that's there, has a little bit of give to it. It's so that it can take that initial shock when it rips out of there. I mean, it's still going pretty fast when those parachutes come out initially, and it has to be able to hold that initial shock that comes out. And that's why they say they stay in that reefed configuration, so they're not taking a huge shock to the system, and then the cord itself has a little bit of give to it as well. Let's see. Maybe, but we hope they don't. Yeah, right. That's yeah. He is correct. Yeah. So Ashley says he's correct. Each chute has an identifying marker, so that each chute can be monitored, so you can see performance in the camera for each chute. Yeah. So I guess that's kind of what I was talking about. Because if you do look at the parachutes, that was kind of my initial consideration. I don't think it has anything to do with the performance of the parachute. It's just because they're all built the same way. But if you look carefully, each one is designed slightly differently than the rest of them, and that would help you identify parachutes 1 through 4. And if parachute number 2 always has a problem, you'd be able to identify that by the markings each time, and then you could go back to your designs and say, well, we gotta fix something with parachute 2 because it always has a problem every single time. Let's see. Did they terminate the booster? As far as we know, no. It was not part of the plan. From what I can tell, everything went according to plan, so I don't believe they that they used the termination system at all. And Ashley also says, the static tag lines. There you go. There's a little more refined definition there for those lines. Yeah, they look frayed, but they're made soft, so they're not hard lines and cause friction on the other lines. They're rubbing against softer rope, safer deployment. Yeah, so they're not super hard lines. It is also hard to get a gauge for like really how thick those parachute lines are here. I'd love to see one in person, because like in camera, it's really hard to get the perspective on how thick those ropes really are. But I believe they're quite large. They're holding parachutes that are responsible for astronauts' life. So, so I believe they're quite large. But all right, let's go back. We're going to continue replaying this pretty much until the press conference, which should be coming up shortly. And we'll just keep chatting it up here for a little bit. So, but yeah, thank you, Ashley Johnson, for the assistance, the assist on the question there. Does anyone know when SpaceX is planning to go to the moon? Yeah, they don't really have a timeline for going to the moon particularly. At the moment, their main priority is this Crew Dragon capsule, getting astronauts to the International Space Station. We have the Starship and Super Heavy rockets, which are being developed. In theory, they have a customer planned for 2023. That's Yusaka Maezawa, planned to go on a trip around the moon in 2023. It's kind of penciled in, tentatively scheduled. But there's no actual mission plan yet to land on the moon. Some people have thrown out that SpaceX wants to land on the moon by 2024, but they haven't really come out and said, like, this is what our plan is. We're going to land on the moon. But when they develop their Starship and Super Heavy rockets, it will be capable of landing on the moon. But they really have to get through the development of that first, and they haven't even gotten that to orbit or even really, suborbital. I mean, I guess you could call the Starhopper suborbital. I mean, it went up and down, but so that was technically suborbital. But yeah, they haven't even launched the first orbital version of the Starship, so they got to get through that first before they even have anything. So, let's see. New explosion photos on Spaceflight Now on Twitter. Oh, we'll take a look at those. John Krause got the second stage splashdown on Twitter. We'll go take a look at John Krause, see what he's got there. Thanks, Steven. We'll take a look at that in a second. Can they recover all pieces used today? Well, the only thing being recovered today, well, I guess they're going to recover the Crew Dragon capsule. And then they have a team of ships and recovery vessels that will be recovering the pieces. So there's just, the first stage booster is going to be in 1 million pieces. A lot of them will sink, and they're expected to sink. That was part of their environmental assessment, is that most of the pieces will sink and not cause adverse effects on marine life. But anything that does float, they're going to spend 8 hours trying to recover. Here's the abort right there. Abort. Crew Dragon capsule pulls away. You can see Crew Dragon is right about here. And here's the first stage. And then boom. Yeah. Look at that. Spectacular view there. And Crew Dragon is somewhere over here. Really tough to see because the SuperDraco engines aren't firing anymore. But the Crew Dragon is somewhere over here, safely away. There it is, the view from on board the Crew Dragon. Let's see. How many sections to the rocket? 3? Yeah, so you've got, basically it's three sections. You've got the first stage of the Falcon 9 with the 9 Merlin engines. You've got the small little interstage. It's basically just a coupler between the first stage and the second stage. You've got the second stage. It did not have an engine, but had a mass simulator. And then you've got the Crew Dragon and the trunk of the Crew Dragon. That's what we're seeing deployed right there. That's the unpressurized version, unpressurized section of Crew Dragon. So I guess, technically there's a couple sections there, but yeah, I would call it 3 sections: the Crew Dragon, second stage, and the first stage. But you can break it down further than that if you want. Let's see, what else did we miss? We're going to look at some of those new explosion photos from Spaceflight Now and from John Krause in a second. Press conference should be starting soon. Parachutes are 160 feet in diameter. Yeah, they are huge parachutes. How long did it take to prepare this? They've been preparing since last spring. For anybody that's been keeping track, they were supposed to launch this last year, but they had that Crew Dragon anomaly that they had to investigate and figure out what went wrong there. So they've been preparing for this for a long time. Oh, there you go. Ashley Johnson's got more info. Parachute lines, I believe, are 5 inches thick at the capsule deployment junction, and they step down to 2 inches in diameter. There are 33 lines per chute at 120 foot diameter. I think the parachutes are 100. I think it's 161 feet in diameter. The actual main parachutes. With this explosion caused harm to the so they did an environmental assessment, and the Environmental Protection Agency was comfortable that this would not cause any major harm to the environment. Could Crew Dragon abort when they are used for cargo missions? I would imagine so. I don't know if they're going. So the plan is, for anybody that's not familiar with this, is NASA is always going to use brand new Crew Dragon capsules for flying astronauts. They will not use a reused one, at least not part of the initial commercial crew contract. They're not ever going to reuse a Crew Dragon capsule. Maybe later on down the road they might, but for this initial contract, they're not using reused capsules. Always brand new. SpaceX, though, will reuse those Crew Dragon capsules for cargo missions to the International Space Station, so they will get reused. What Optimum Benja is asking is, will it have abort capabilities? I wouldn't see why not. SpaceX actually added kind of an abort contingency plan after CRS-7. When CRS-7 broke up back in 2015, the capsule, the Cargo Dragon capsule, the Dragon 1 capsule, actually survived, but they had no software in their programming to tell the Cargo Dragon capsule to deploy its parachutes if something goes wrong. So the capsule survived the initial rapid unscheduled disassembly, but then crashed into the ocean and was destroyed. And they actually added a contingency scenario that said, like, if that happened again, like, hey, throw your parachutes out so we can save the cargo. So I imagine they'll still keep the abort capabilities even for Cargo Dragon, because that's expensive stuff and stuff that people have spent a lot of time and money on to get to the International Space Station. So let's see, I just want to pull up the NASA TV feed so we don't miss it. All right, they haven't started yet. I'm gonna keep an eye on it over here, and once I see the press conference start, we'll throw it up on the big screen here. Let's see. Let's see. Mary says smash the like button. Yeah, thanks, Mary. Smash it if that's your thing. I would appreciate any likes or hearts on, if you're watching on Periscope or Facebook, whatever you do. You know how the social media thing works. You got to like, you got to subscribe. I mean, that's how this thing works. If you want, no pressure, but I'd appreciate it. How is oxygen the fuel? Oxygen is not the fuel. That's the oxidizer. So if you know the triangle of fuel or a fire, you need basically you need the what is the triangle of fuel? You need something to burn, an oxygen source, and an ignition source. Is that right? I don't know. I could be getting that totally wrong, but basically it has a propellant, an oxidizer, because you got to bring your own oxygen to space. In order to burn stuff, you need that oxidizer, so you got to bring your own oxygen to space. But the propellant really is kind of what's burning. It's the propellant and the oxidizer together. And then the ignition source for the Falcon 9 is TEA-TEB, but the SuperDraco engines, there are 8 of those on board in 4 pods, 2 engines each pod. That's a hypergolic fuel that combusts instantly on contact. Oxidizer is basically, it's oxygen. In order to burn the propellant, you need oxygen. So that's an oxidizer. It's basically just oxygen. Liquid oxygen is what they have on board. The Falcon 9 rocket, super chilled liquid oxygen. What type of propulsion does the capsule have itself if they need to maneuver? So the capsule has Draco engines or Draco thrusters. Those are for on-orbit maneuvers. And they were used today during the abort to kind of flip it around to get it oriented to come back. So they have Draco thrusters that are for on-orbit maneuvers and moving the capsule around, and then they have SuperDraco engines that are strictly just for abort. Originally, they were going to use the SuperDraco engines to land propulsively and actually land on land instead of landing in the ocean. but that was going to be, it's still capable of doing that, but that was going to be too hard to certify for crewed missions, so they scrapped that plan, and they're not going to use that for any of the NASA crewed missions. Let's see. Yeah, they haven't started the press conference yet, but it does say that it's up next. They already blowed up the test. Yes, the test has already happened. There's splashdown. We've replayed it a million times here. We're going to keep replaying it a million times. We'll just back it up here. We'll keep talking. Was the rocket meant to explode? Yes. It was completely planned, meant to explode. That was completely expected. Because basically, I mean, you had this, nice aerodynamic shell on top of the rocket, the nice pointy end that was pushing through the atmosphere and doing just fine. But once you pull that away from the rocket, you don't have a pointy end anymore. You have a very blunt end of the rocket that's just plowing through the atmosphere at 2,000 kilometers per hour. And that's very stressful for the rocket. It tore apart and exploded in a million pieces in spectacular fashion, if I might say so. It's a waste of resources, that exploding fuel. I mean, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. It's not really a waste of resources because you're accomplishing something. Like, you need these resources to accomplish this, and this was needed to get to crewed flight. So yeah, we just exploded a bunch of oxygen and rocket grade kerosene and lost a bunch of helium in the process, but this was necessary to get to crewed missions. So it was part of the process, so I don't consider that a waste of resources. Let's see. Laylo wants to know if it was a successful mission. As far as I can tell, we're waiting for the press conference to start, but as far as I can tell, yes, this was a successful mission. Everything looked to go perfectly as part of the plan. So we're going to replay it again. We'll replay it a bunch of times. Oh, and I forgot. I got to look at, wanted to look at those Twitter photos. Maybe from John Krause. John Krause, let me just give John Krause some major props here for the moment, because this guy is a magician. I don't know how he's able to do this, because he is able to publish amazing photos in like record time. Like, I don't know. It's just insane how quickly he can publish like good photos too. Let's see. People have pointed out that this is likely the second stage splashing down thing. Okay, let's see. I gotta find. All right, let's go here. You guys can. Press conference hasn't started yet. Here, let me turn the volume on the press conference so I don't have to stare at it, but I will at least hear it in my ear. Actually, let me let the abort sequence play out here, because it's going to happen in just a couple seconds. Here's the point where the abort happened, right there. Engine shut down. You can see the Crew Dragon capsule pulling away. There's Crew Dragon right there, a little white speck, and then this is going to go kaboom. That's the first stage, just plowing through the atmosphere, and finally it breaks apart enough where the tanks rupture and it just explodes in spectacular fashion. And then you can see a good portion of the first stage left here. There's something small up here. I don't know what that is, but so that was the abort sequence. But so let's see. We have so this is space flight now. Let's go over to, let's see, which page am I trying to get you to? This one here. All right, so we're over on Twitter. This is at Spaceflight Now on Twitter. Here's another angle of the Crew Dragon abort test showing the Falcon 9 breaking apart in a fireball as planned and debris falling towards the Atlantic Ocean. Crew Dragon capsule splashdown under parachute successfully there. So this is from at Spaceflight Now if you want to give them a follow. But there's the big kaboom. You can see good portion of the first stage, what was left of it, and I think more of the kaboom there and there. So there's kind of a nice look at what's left of the booster in the second stage there. It's hard to tell. I don't know, this kind of looks like the interstage here. So maybe this is like the second stage, like face down. And this is the interstage, like this, basically the top of, this is upside down, like this would be the top of the rocket and this would be the bottom. I don't know, it's hard to tell what's happening there. And then John Krause, this dude's a wizard. At John Krause Photos there, if you want to give him a follow. Amazing rocket photographer, just fantastic. He's look at this. This is incredible, dude. You are a magician with photos. He's already got a whole gallery up that you can order prints and check it out. I would definitely recommend it. Like, he is just awesome. Let's see. Oh, here's the okay. Well, cloud cover spoiled our view of the Crew Dragon aboard. We were still able to treat a spectacular than that. Yeah, so here's John's photo of liftoff, and then oh, look at this. There's a little bit of an explosion there at splashdown. So that's got to be whatever was left of either the first or second stage. I think it sounded like some people were saying that was the second stage. So make sure you give John Krause Photos a follow, a like. Go buy some prints from him, or you know, he does spectacular work. Let's see. People have pointed out that this is likely the second stage splashing down. Thanks. This means you don't have to reply saying it's the second stage interstage has been clarified. Yeah. So it sounds like that's the second stage splashing down and exploding at the water. That's kind of cool that he was able to capture that and see that. And he's got a bunch of, I'm just going to scroll through them quickly, but he's got a bunch of beautiful photos already from the launch. Definitely go check those out. How do I get out of here? I'm going to go back to here. I want to go check out his photos and give him a like and a follow, and purchase a print. Hang it up in your house. That would be pretty awesome. All right. Did anybody else see, if you saw any other awesome photos or anything like that, let me know. We'll show them around for people to see, but other than that, we're just waiting for the press conference here. It was supposed to be at 11:30. That was 10 minutes ago. I don't know. I probably ought to look at my Twitter notifications and see, did they move the press conference? Does anybody know? Let's see. Yep, liftoff. Yeah, we did that. Yep. All right. Sorry, I'm just going through my Twitter notifications and trying to see if I got a million notifications here. Does anybody know if they moved the press conference? Because it's supposed to be 11:30. That was 12 minutes ago. And I don't see anything about the press conference in my notifications, but, you know, I only have about 10 million notifications here, so it's going to take me a minute to go through. But at least we'll show the launch again here while I'm going through my notifications. Yeah, get rid of that. Hard to see due to haze, but they had, oh, looks like, did Emery Kelly get splashed down the crew? Oh, no, that's just a screenshot from the SpaceX broadcast. Yeah, so I don't see any notification about the press conference here. Yeah, okay. Sorry. I want to hear the press conference. Yeah, me too. I'm kind of curious. Deborah's asking for John Krause. I guess the spelling of John Krause. You're pretty close. JohnCraus and then photos. So he's at John Krause Photos on Twitter. You can also probably just search it on Google. He'll come up. He's amazing. Thomas says he would have seen it if there were no clouds. I hate the weather. I know it's such a bummer, but I'm glad we got this view right there. Look at that. There it is again, the big explosion there. Let's see. NASA channel was showing 11:30, and then it says next, so just waiting. Yeah, I'm on the NASA TV channel here now as well, and yeah, it just says post-test media conference coming up next, and it's been like this for 15 minutes. So Chris Gebhardt says they're still waiting. Thanks Kilowatts for that. Yeah, so Chris Gebhardt is with NASA Spaceflight, NASA Spaceflight, right? And hugely helpful reporter that's down there at Cape Canaveral, so he'd be one of the ones that are at the press conference. He said they're still waiting. Let's see. Jim Bridenstine tweeted. He did he? Mary wants to know if I work for SpaceX. I do not work for SpaceX. Just a fan. Let's see. Let's see. Jim Bridenstine. Did he say something about the press conference? I see congratulations. Next up, in-flight abort news conference, 11:30. Yeah, everybody just says 11:30. It's 11:45. So we'll get there eventually, hopefully. Oh, Brandon from HoverSlam got a good one too. I went to the NASA social with him. Let's see. Let me look at. This is that is a cool one. Yeah, well done, Brandon from HoverSlam Space. We'll go. Oh, you're not on the right screen. You guys can't see this. Let me get you over here. Okay, so this is Brandon Wynn at Brandon H Slam. He also has so his company is called HoverSlam Space. It's at HoverSlam Space on Twitter. So he took this photo, which is just awesome. Look at that. It's very dramatic looking with the big black vignette there around the edges. That looks pretty cool. I like that. So props to him for that. That almost looks like staged. Like no, here we go. Now I said it. Now you're gonna get insert the conspiracy theorists. You're gonna come rolling through the comments. But it looks, I don't know. It looks like I don't know. It looks cool. It looks awesome. But there you go. So props to Brandon for getting that photo. I'm sure he's got others. Yeah, over here on his HoverSlam Space. Oh, that was from a while ago. That's not from this launch, but there you go. Even more boom. Oh, here he goes. That was bonkers. He said. There's another shot from Brandon from HoverSlam. Yeah, so definitely go check those out. A couple of photographers there that have gotten some amazing photos so far. And we'll have to see. There were other people that had video as well. We'll have to see what sort of video comes out from it. Obviously, we've got this video that we've replayed a million times. Let's see, what else did we miss here? Did anybody else? And thanks to Steven for pointing out that that photo there. There we go. Let's see, what else did we miss? Did I see any other? I don't see any others at the moment, but if I see any, I will let you know. All right, let's go back. Any news on the press conference? We're still waiting on that press conference. Press conference is coming up at 11:30, which is about almost 20 minutes ago. We're not there yet. We're just gonna keep replaying this a million times. Let's see. Hello to Chase Jones. Chase says hi. Awesome pick. Check out. Oh, Jack Byer. Did Jack Byer post some too? Thanks, Zach. Jack I don't know if it's Jack Bayer or Jack Bayer. I have not met Jack in person. I've met a lot of these guys in person, but I have not met Jack in person. But he also takes some awesome photos. He had some great photos of the Star Hopper. Let's see if we can find him as well. Let's see. Oh, couldn't see the impact, but wow, what a mushroom cloud. Yeah, let's see if we can. I'll show Jack's photo here. Let's get you back over, and we'll go full screen so you can see this. So this is at the Jack Bayer on Twitter as well. He's also a photo magician, aerospace and launch photographer. So he's at the Jack Bayer on Twitter. So definitely take a look at that. Make sure you give him a like and a follow as well, because here's some of the awesome ones from Star Hopper when he was there. Those were pretty awesome as well. And he retweeted Brandon's photo. But couldn't see the impact from my vantage point, but wow, what a mushroom cloud. So there's his photo of the explosion from the second stage, because it looked like that John Krause photo looked like when the second stage hit, it still had some propellant that it burned up in the final moments. And so that's probably what that big mushroom cloud is right there. And there's this one here. I don't know who this is. Future Steve Jurvetson. I don't know Steve. But he posted this photo. Bada boom, as expected, a crowd pleaser. Once the crew capsule is safely ejected from the booster, the remains shred and go boom. Capsule off frame to the right, used its SuperDraco thrusters to reorient. Oh no, Draco thrusters to reorient, and came in for a soft parachute landing at sea. Congrats, SpaceX. So there's one from Steve Jurvetson. He's at Future Jurvetson on Twitter there as well. You can check that one out too. All right. Let's see. Oh, sound! I hear sound. That's got to be the press conference starting. Yeah. All right. We're gonna get the press conference up. Okay. Let's get the replay text off. Here we go.
And welcome to this post-launch press conference talking about the in-flight abort of SpaceX's Crew Dragon, an important part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program. Today with us, we have some great guests who will provide some remarks. First will be Jim Bridenstine, NASA Administrator, Elon Musk, Chief Engineer at SpaceX, Kathy Leaders, the Program Manager for Commercial Crew Program at NASA, and astronauts Mike Hopkins and Victor Glover. They'll begin with, as I mentioned, opening remarks, and then we'll open it to questions from both the members, the media in the audience, and those who have called via the phone, and also social media. You can ask your questions on social media by using the hashtag AskNASA. With that, let's kick it off with Administrator Jim Bridenstine.
Well, thank you, Bettina. Another amazing milestone is complete for our very soon-to-be project, which is launching American astronauts on American rockets from American soil for the first time since the retirement of the space shuttles. We're very grateful. Congratulations to SpaceX and the entire NASA team on this final major flight milestone that we needed to accomplish. Make no mistake, there's a lot left to do. We have a number of parachute tests upcoming, and of course we're going to get a lot of data from this particular test, and so we're not quite there yet, but by all accounts, this was a very successful test. And when we think about what we have done so far with the Crew Dragon, we've had a pad abort test that was successful. We've had now a high altitude abort test that has been successful. On Demo 1, we launched, we controlled the spacecraft, we docked to the International Space Station, we undocked, and then we had entry, descent, and landing. So this is a program that is moving forward very fast, and I personally want to give my strongest congratulations to the NASA team, which has been amazing, and of course the SpaceX team, which has also been amazing. So congratulations to everybody involved, and I'll turn it over to Elon.
All right, well, let's see. I'd like to likewise just express great appreciation and admiration for the SpaceX and NASA teams that made this happen. Without a lot of dedicated people at SpaceX and NASA, this would not have happened. So it's just thank you for your hard work and dedication to achieving this the success of this mission. There's I think a few points that are kind of exciting to note. That the peak velocity of Dragon during abort was more than double the speed of sound. It went to Mach 2.2 and achieved an altitude of 40 kilometers or 131,000 feet. So I think these are pretty exciting specs. To be for the sport to have gone more than 3 times the altitude of a typical airliner, and to accelerate that rapidly away from a booster. And I think if you saw in the video that the booster actually exploded as expected. So that was very exciting, and it landed in relatively high winds at the ocean level, which I think helps us envelope the mission for when it is crewed, since we expect this to be sort of an enveloping condition for the winds at sea level at the recovery site for when crews are launched. So overall, as far as we can tell thus far, it is a picture-perfect mission. It went as well as one could possibly expect. And again, dedication. This is a reflection of the dedication of the hard work of the SpaceX NASA teams to achieve this goal. Obviously, I'm super fired up. This is great. It's really great. And we're looking forward to the next step, and I think we'll talk more about next steps in as we get further into comments.
And I'm super fired up too. This is really exciting. As we talked about when we all got together, gosh, was it a couple of days ago? We said this was going to be an exciting test. My boss told me, hey, don't talk about launch vehicle launches and exciting at the same time, but I think you guys saw today that it was a very exciting test. I'm also super proud of the team. I really appreciate the comments from Jim and Elon. Not only was it a NASA SpaceX team, it was a multi-agency, the FAA, the Air Force, the DET, everybody's out there, made sure that we had imagery assets and the ability to be able to accomplish this mission. And honestly, folks are out there right now recovering the spacecraft, which is going to be very, very critical for us. We're super excited that it all went well. We talked about needing to thread the needle with all the weather, and we did. We did have to thread the needle. In fact, the needle was getting, the head, the eye was getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and all this will be good data for us and for our crews that will be flying soon. So thank you, Elon, to your team. Fabulous job. Thank you to the NASA team. Fabulous job, and looking forward to the next steps.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. Wow, what a day. I also want to say it's very exciting to see this. And it's great to get to this major test milestone. We appreciate certainly all of the hard work that the NASA and the SpaceX teams and everybody else that made this event happen. As crew members, our families, you can imagine, we're very interested in these escape systems and how well they work. And so we're going to be following very closely as the data comes in and we continue to analyze it. And see what that means. And in fact, the work is ongoing, as was mentioned. The recovery operations, Bob and Doug, the DM2 crew, are actually taking this opportunity to follow those operations and see what they can learn from that, because this is one of the only times they'll have an opportunity to see those operations when it's not them. So again, congratulations, and we look forward to the next steps as well.
And since my comments are the only thing between us and your questions, I'll keep it brief. First, to our families that are out there watching, a lot of them were very interested in this test for obvious reasons, and so far what we've seen is what we expected. So that's the first one. And then to you all, the team that has helped make this happen, SpaceX, NASA, the Air Force, and all of the folks who worked so hard to get us to this point, from the crew, but also from our families, we want to say thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to now take questions from the media. We'll take a few questions here, and then we'll go to those that have called in social media. With that, we'll first start with Marcia.
Marcia Dunn, Associated Press. Elon, Kathy told us the other day that you could carry crew as soon as March. Is that feasible, and when do you think the crew launch might be?
Well, we were just talking about this in the green room, and my guess is the first question that will be asked is. So we agreed on response. So it's collectively. This is not. So the hardware necessary for the first crewed launch, we believe, will be ready by the end of February. However, there's still a lot of work once the hardware is ready to just cross-check everything, triple check, quadruple check, go over everything again until every stone has been turned over 3 or 4 times. And there's also the schedule for getting to space station. So because space station has a lot of things going to it, so what's the right timing for this? And the sort of collective wisdom at this point is that we think we're highly confident the hardware will be ready in Q1, most likely end of February, but no later than March, and that we think it appears probable that the first crewed launch would occur in the second quarter.
Oh, I think that's a very fair assessment. I would also say we have to make some decisions on our end from a NASA perspective. Do we want that first crew to be a short duration, or do we want it to be a longer duration? If it's going to be a longer duration, then we have to have some additional training for our astronauts to actually be prepared to do things on the International Space Station that we weren't planning to have that initial test crew necessarily do. So we've got to look at that and make a determination. Do we want that first crew to be longer duration, or do we want them to be a quick turnaround? And those are decisions that we're going to be making in the coming weeks. But as Elon said, there's a lot of we have to understand all of the data. This was a test. It looked beautiful. We all loved watching it. But now the work begins for evaluating everything that we're going to learn on this test.
To be clear, the data or telemetry all looks picture perfect, at least as far as we've seen thus far. But we need to physically recover the spacecraft and confirm that there's not something not an issue that perhaps didn't show up on telemetry. Yeah.
Next question. Chris Davenport.
Hi, Chris Davenport from the Washington Post. I guess for Elon and Jim, and I wonder if you chose this as the second question in your betting pool. If you could talk about how profound it would be and what it would mean to restore human spaceflight from U.S. soil. It seems like we're at a real turning point, and it's just that closer, what that would mean from both SpaceX perspective and from NASA's. Thank you.
I'll let you go, Elon.
Oh, okay, I was going to let you go. Well, I think it's really quite profound. I think the United States is very much a nation of explorers, a distillation of the human spirit of exploration, and it's obviously something that appeals to people with have an adventurous. Anyone who has an adventurous bone in their body is going to be very excited about this, and I think it will help reinvigorate interest in space. It's remarkable to think that the last time that a crewed launch vehicle departed from the United States was, I believe, 2011 or thereabouts. So it's been almost a decade, which is remarkable. And so I think it would be really profound to have that. It's kind of to be back in the saddle again and to be launching frequently with an astronaut crew. I think it's something that matters to all Americans and to people worldwide.
And I would say certainly we are 100%. We are a nation of explorers. We're also a nation that leads, and this, of course, represents us returning American astronauts to space on American rockets from American soil. So this is a great opportunity for us to once again lead. And this time when we lead, we're doing it differently than we've ever done it before. NASA is going to be a customer. We're going to be one customer of many customers, and we want Elon to have lots of customers. But we also want to have numerous providers. We need dissimilar redundancy. You guys have heard me say this. I'm going to keep saying it. We've had days in this country where we lost a space shuttle and our space program was down for a period of years at a time. We need to make sure that we have redundancy in a way that doesn't happen again. And of course, if we look at what we've done with commercial resupply to the International Space Station, there's a perfect example of how sometimes when there is a setback, we can continue to move forward because we have other solution sets to accomplish the objectives. So all of this is important for a very specific reason. We're on the cusp of commercializing low Earth orbit. I want to see large amounts of capital flowing into activities that include humans in space. And those activities could be industrialized biomedicine, it could be advanced materials, and it could be people that want to go to space for tourism purposes. But I will tell you this, there is a future where space is commercialized. And I also want to be clear that NASA will always have a presence in low Earth orbit. We are not, there's a lot left to learn. We are only on the beginning of what we're going to learn. So what does that mean? That means NASA is going to be a customer. We just want to make sure there are customers that are not just NASA. That drives down our costs, it increases our access, and it's not just for us, but for the entire world and for the private sector as well.
Next question. Lauren? Second row.
Hi, Lauren Gresh with The Verge. The explosion that happened today with the Falcon 9 looked really cool, but I'm curious to know what would happen if an explosion like that occurred while the Crew Dragon was still attached. The Crew Dragon was quite a bit away when it occurred, but is there any concern about that happening for the crew's safety, and how quickly does that capsule move away in those first couple of seconds?
Sure. In principle, the system is designed to withstand a sort of a first stage booster explosion that is, or upstage explosion that is there. That happens when basically even before the escape event. So it's intended to be very robust in principle. And the way to think of the rocket booster is it's less of an explosion than it is fire. So it's a fireball, but it's much more fireball than it is an overpressure event like an explosion. Since the spacecraft has a very powerful base heat shield and even leeward side heat shield, it should be really not significantly affected by a fireball. So it could quite literally, like something out of Star Wars, fly right out of the fireball. So that's obviously we want to avoid doing that, but it is really meant to be something that can fly out of the fireball. There may be a few points that are worth mentioning. That in how is Dragon better than some what was done, say, during the Apollo era. The fact that the launch abort system is integrated with the spacecraft, with the SuperDracos thrusters in the sidewall, means that you have launch abort capability all the way to orbit. And whereas previously with the launch escape tower, that because it's so heavy, that is discarded often just 20 or 30% of the time into flight. So shortly, not long after liftoff, the typically launch escape tower, which is sort of the historical architecture, would be discarded. So you would lose the ability to abort after that point. Whereas Dragon has abort capability all the way to orbit. And then if you have a state change, anything that's a significant state change post liftoff is something to be concerned about. And not having to eject the launch escape tower, I think, is also an improvement in safety. So I think those two are significant steps in the right direction. There's also an improved ability for reusability. Since you're not throwing away the launch escape tower, you retain the SuperDraco thrusters. That you can now reuse the launch escape system with every flight, because it should hopefully be very rare that the escape thrusters are used. So that I think those three points are a meaningful improvement over designs in the past. And then one of the things we obviously this requires ongoing discussions with NASA, but I think it would be quite cool to use the boats that we are using to catch the fairing, once that is really well established, to catch Dragon as it's coming in from orbit, and then that would alleviate some of the constraints around a water landing. But that's obviously there's some time before making that happen, and we obviously need to recover fairings reliably before we would consider trying to catch the Dragon. But I think that would be also an improvement as opposed to landing in the water.
And if I can just add one thing to what Elon's saying, one of the most important things is that we're monitoring the vehicle, the launch vehicle, to make sure that you're recognizing when the launch vehicle is having a problem so that the abort system's working, right? So we've spent a lot of time together talking about, how does the spacecraft monitor the launch vehicle and then make sure that it's going to abort before it starts getting into those situations too, right? So all the things Elon's kind of like icing on the cake and additional. The spacecraft's robust. It can handle, these kinds of situations, but more importantly, we're getting the crew away before the launch vehicle is in a position where you're having to expose the crew to the fireball, right?
So and everything he said is absolutely accurate. There are huge advantages to integrating the launch abort system into the spacecraft itself, and those advantages are we can abort all the way out to almost space. The downside is it's engineeringly it's a very difficult thing to achieve, and of course we learned that back in April when we had some oxidizer go into the pressurant system and resulted in a catastrophic loss. But that's why we do these things. That's why we test, and because of the way we're acquiring this, we have very innovative partners that are doing things that have never been done before with a purpose. The purpose is to ultimately save lives, drive down costs, and increase access to space. So all of these things are working. It is absolutely true that we will have setbacks as we learn these things, but it is also true that we are going to be better off for it. And of course, what Kathy said is absolutely true as well. This spacecraft knows precisely where it is in space. Latitude, when I say space, I don't mean outer space, I just mean in space in general. Latitude, longitude, altitude, yaw, pitch, roll, trajectory, velocity. It constantly knows where it's supposed to be, and it knows what's happening to it. And so it can make a determination early, before the explosion were to happen, to execute the launch abort capability. So I think we're where we need to be, but it hasn't been without pain. And going forward, we're going to be better for it.
Great. Joey, second row. Yeah.
This could be a lot of questions here, so this may go for a while.
Question for Jim and Elon. First, Elon, will you be able to recover any of the Falcon 9 or its second stage? How badly damaged was it when it hit the ocean? And have you? There was a pretty tall plume of smoke, so I don't know. And for future Crew Dragon missions, have you signed up any private astronaut missions yet? Does this test kind of push forward any agreements with that? And for Bridenstine, similarly, have you signed up any international partners? And what does this mission mean for that? Thanks.
Well, there's definitely not any big pieces of the rocket left. If you saw something, there was a sort of object that was sort of falling. We think that's most likely the thrust structure of the first stage propulsion section, which is extra robust and has the engines in it. But that is going to hit the water hard and then be somewhere down at the bottom of the ocean. So we're not expecting to recover anything. In general, we would not expect to recover anything in a launch abort scenario. So that it seems quite unlikely. I think we don't have any anything to announce in that regard at this time.
That sounds very mysterious.
I think we need more customers, is what I think.
Yeah.
But on the international front, you should know this. We have no shortage of partners that are wanting to have access to space, and this is going to give not just us, but them additional access to space. We don't have any agreements at this point to ride on these vehicles, although we're going to have, the International Space Station, we've got 15 nations that operate it. We've had astronauts from 19 different nations, and we anticipate those partnerships all to go forward. And of course, they're going to be very excited about riding on a Falcon rocket and in a Crew Dragon. Yep.
Great. We're going to take some questions from the reporters that are on the line. The first one is from Jackie Waddle, CNN. Jackie?
Hey, folks. Thanks so much for doing this. So I wanted to check in about the parachutes. I know it's early, but were you pleased with how the Mark III parachutes performed today? And then with whatever testing that you still have ahead for the parachutes, what are you still hoping to determine?
Kathy, why don't you take it?
So today was the second system level test, what we're viewing as a second system level test of the upgraded, what we call our Mark III chute design. SpaceX has been doing a tremendous amount of testing over this last 6 months. Really perfected the design, did a system level test in December, did another system level test, obviously today in a pretty stressing environment, and then we're working together to get a new set of flight chutes and do 2 more system level tests prior to our next crewed flight test. Working through that with SpaceX and looking forward to further learning and hopefully, smooth parachute functioning on the next 2 system level tests. But we're very, very happy. If you saw it today, flawless execution of both the drogues and the mains, and both of those were the new system.
And I would say from NASA's perspective, we are so grateful to SpaceX for stepping up to the plate in a major way to move forward with the Mark III parachutes. There was a time we looked at the safety factor from a Mark II to Mark III. Mark II was good. Mark III was way better. Elon and I had a conversation. I said, look, if we want to move forward quickly, let's go with the Mark III, and let's get as much testing as we can possibly get done between now and the day we launch Crew. And they move forward very quickly. I don't know how many tests you've done at this point, but it's a lot with single chutes. And now we're up to the point where we're doing full system level tests with all 4 chutes. And so far they're looking good. So we're grateful to the SpaceX team. I also want to say thank you to the Airborne team. I've had a couple of conversations with the CEO of Airborne, told him what a high priority this is for our nation. And they've been working overtime to make sure these parachutes are developed and packed, and we're grateful for their support as well.
Yeah, I'd also like to say thanks for the Airborne team. They've been essential in this.
Yeah, this is an unprecedented amount of parachute testing I think that we've ever seen from a NASA perspective. So really great partnership across the NASA, SpaceX, and Airborne team.
Our next question is from Tim Fahrenholtz from Quartz.
Hello, everybody. Congratulations on the test today.
I just wanted to ask if we could get some understanding of what the next couple months look like from an analysis perspective. How many people at NASA are going to be working on certifying the Dragon and the Starliner eventually for the crewed flight tests? And how does that compare to the experience during the COTS program?
Kathy?
So I actually worked on both cargo and then now crew, right? And I'll tell you from a station perspective, which is what the cargo program was focused on, it's consistent between obviously cargo and crew. What's different is that obviously crew's different, and the certification requirements for crew are different. So I think even though we have a small program standpoint, I think we're probably about 2 to 3 times the amount of NASA folks that are working crew versus cargo, the certification aspect of cargo, which to me makes a lot of sense because cargo was really focused, the NASA certification aspect was just focused on making sure the vehicle could safely dock with station. For crew, obviously, we need to make sure we're certifying the ground systems, the operations, the launch vehicle, and the spacecraft. So obviously, that's kind of 4 times the amount of work that you had to do for cargo. So that's kind of sized appropriately to me.
Okay. We'll take one more question from the phone, and then we'll go back into the room. And next is Irene Klotz from Aviation Week.
My question's for Elon. Does this in-flight abort test have any applications for programs beyond commercial crews, specifically for Starship? And also, does somebody have the exact wind speed at the recovery site? Thank you.
Okay. No, I don't think this has. It's not directly relevant to Starship, as we do not expect to use parachutes on Starship. Albeit, like the only reason Starship is happening is because of the progress made with essentially all the work done by NASA and others before SpaceX even started, and the support that we've received after starting, without which Starship would not be possible. And I didn't catch the second question. Wind speed touchdown. Wind speed touchdown, I believe was I think around 25 to 30 feet per second.
Wind speed at touchdown was 27 knots.
Yeah, 27 knots. Yeah.
Feet per second, sorry, 27 feet per second. Yeah. 17, 17, yeah, 20, yeah, I'm sorry, 20 knots. That would have been a stressing test. Sorry.
It was oscillating, but it's sort of in the high 20s.
13 to 18 knots, and I think we got like 27 feet per second.
It provides a good envelope in case for crewed missions.
Yeah.
Okay. Our next question?
That's like 18 miles per hour or like 30 kilometers per hour, in case you're trying to convert from knots there.
You were beaming, and so I really want to hear from you what it was like. Where did you watch from? Was it the control room? Was any of your family with you? And what did you learn?
So we were in the firing room, and anytime you see a rocket launch is very exciting. And obviously, the significance of this particular launch and the test was something that we were particularly interested in, and to see that. Our families were not here with us; they were back home. But I did receive a text from my wife right afterwards, and said everything looked good from her perspective. So they're obviously very interested in it as well, and again, every time I'm out here, this is just a special place, and when you get to see these rockets launch, it just gives you goosebumps, and I'm getting goosebumps again right now.
So no, the families weren't there. My wife also was in touch via text message, and learning that happened today, or maybe relearning, or adding more context to the fact that we have an amazing team working through the issues with the weather and making sure that the vehicle, both Falcon and Dragon, were ready to launch. It was just impressive to be on the loops and listen to them disposition all of those things and make sure that we would have a test at all. So just getting to the point where we could launch, it was impressive to be there amongst the folks making it happen.
Okay, we're going to take a question from social media quickly.
All right, I have a question from Ashley James Lee. She says, great test, well done. What would be the reason for the splashdown being earlier than expected on the timeline?
It wasn't.
I thought it was pretty much right on target for what we were expecting. So obviously we can go back and look at the data, but right now it's looking like things were pretty nominal.
Yeah.
I think they said on the broadcast that it was earlier than expected.
Third row.
But I don't know if that was precise, if they were really measuring it. But they did say that on the broadcast, which is probably what the
Thank you.
social
Sawyer
media
Rosenstein with
comments.
Talking Space. So I know a lot of the focus is obviously going to be on the data from the Crew Dragon, but I was also wondering how much data you were able to get after the breakup of the first stage, and if there's any plans to use that data for possible future mission parameters for crew or for range or anything like that.
We lost telemetry on the first stage shortly after it exploded.
Makes sense.
Okay. From the breakup of the vehicle that could possibly change design or engineering in the future of it?
It's possible, but it's too early to say at this point.
Gotcha.
Okay. Third row, I'm sorry, on this side with the hat.
Hi, I'm Jim Siegel. I'm with NASA Tech, and I have a couple of questions. Well, actually, one question, I suppose, for the two astronauts. I understand you went through kind of a dress rehearsal on Friday, so you got a chance to get into the capsule while it was atop the rocket. And I'm interested in what kinds of activities that you did while you were doing this. What systems did you check out? Did you eat? Did you take a nap? What did you do?
Right. So the dress rehearsal, actually, Bob and Doug were the ones that participated in that as the DM2 crew. And essentially it started from crew wake up all the way through listening to a weather brief and then getting handed over to SpaceX at the suit up room. And so they were then able to don their suits and go through that full process of checking the suits for leaks, and then from there, walking out to the vehicles, getting in the convoy, and going from our crew quarters over to the launch pad itself, and then going up onto the tower and walking out on the crew arm. They did not actually get into the vehicle because the vehicle wasn't in a configuration for them to get strapped in or anything, and so that was the point where that dress rehearsal ended. A lot of that data was timeline type data that we were getting, just making sure everything flowed together. The communication was good between all of the different team members. And I think there was a lot of lessons learned that came out of it, and people are making adjustments as necessary based on what we saw. Anything else? Nope. Yeah. Thank you. You bet.
Okay. Chris, over here in the second row.
Chris Gebhardt with NASA Spaceflight for Jim and Elon. So you mentioned that the decision will be forthcoming in the next few weeks as to whether DM2 will be short duration or long duration. I'm wondering from NASA's side why that hasn't been decided yet this close to a particular launch, especially with the U.S. crew segment reducing down in size in the coming months. And from SpaceX's perspective, is there anything that would have to be done to the capsule at this point, depending on what that decision is?
So by standard, if we go with the plan as it currently stands, we would launch, DM2 as a short duration test flight, and then we would have an operational flight test later with our two astronauts here, and they would do a long duration flight. So that's one solution, and that's where things stand as of right now. But we might look at making that first crew be a longer duration crew, for the purpose of getting the maximum amount of capability out of the International Space Station, with having, basically we'll be able to maintain a larger presence of astronauts on the space station for a longer period of time. So there's another competing interest here. And in order to make that happen, that first crew for DM1, the test flight that crew would need to go through some additional training for a longer duration flight to do activities on the International Space Station. It also gives us opportunities to do extravehicular activities that may not right now be scheduled, but may pop up based on things that happen on the ISS. And it's always better to have more crew on board for those activities rather than less. If we end up with one American on the International Space Station, then that American will be doing the EVA. And we want to make sure that we give us the best chance of success. Now, I'm not saying that this is the direction we're going to go. We just haven't decided yet. And we're working through it. But the good thing is, given what looks like to be a very successful test, we now have options. So that's a positive thing.
From a SpaceX standpoint, we'll make sure we're ready to serve whatever needs NASA may have. And so whatever decision is made, that we can support either.
Yeah, thank you.
And we've insured the vehicle. We've been working with SpaceX to ensure the vehicle really has had the capability to be able to have a longer duration mission really over the last 6-7 months. Been working with SpaceX. Just like Jim said, you always need to have options when you're dealing with these types of missions.
Emery in the fourth row.
Hey, question for Elon. Obviously, an abort scenario is a different kind of stress on the
high stress.
Yeah. I'm wondering if that impacts reusability. Do you get fewer flights out of a Crew Dragon in that scenario, or is that to be determined?
I'm not sure. We would really require a lot of thought and, of course, support from NASA to refly a Dragon that went through an abort. I hope that there's such a rare event that the circumstance never comes up.
I'll tell you one thing that impressed me. When we looked at the ballistic reentry that Nick Hague went through on a Soyuz rocket just a year ago, he was up around 6.5, almost 7 G on that ballistic reentry. Now, he was at a much higher altitude, but this entire launch abort sequence that we just saw, the highest G state was about 3.5 Gs. And then when it was, coming back, we're looking at like 2.3 G, which is, that's impressive. It looked like it would have been maybe a rough ride, but the data didn't bear that out. And, I think that gives our astronauts some confidence that the ride might not be so bad if we have to execute one of these launch abort capabilities.
Yeah, the launch abort capability is in principle capable of up to sort of six or more Gs, but it limits the acceleration to maximize the comfort of or safety of the astronauts. So it's reconfiguring depending upon what achieves the maximum probability of safety and minimizes injury.
Next question. To the writer.
Hi, Stephen Clark from Spaceflight Now. Can someone update us on the condition of the spacecraft after the splashdown? Have the recovery teams got to it? Is it on the boat yet? And
is he texting somebody? Give me an update.
Seats from Russia to get through the year or into next year, or is that still ongoing?
So at this point, as much confidence as we have in the team, I think it's probably not prudent to go that direction. I think it's important that we have options. Again, we want to increase our option space and make sure that the International Space Station has continuous American presence. And so we're not ready to make any adjustments on that front. We're going to buy another Soyuz seat.
Sorry, I was just looking to see if I'd received an update, but I think the recovery vessel is just securing it right now, so we do not have additional information at this time.
Question here, second row.
Congratulations, Robin from Supercluster. Have you flown the Dragon simulator in Hawthorne, and have you tried on the suit multiple times?
I've tried. I've tried it on the helmet, and I've flown the docking simulator several times. Are you good at it? You know,
I'll tell you, I am. I nailed it first time.
Were you good at it?
And of course, every time since.
But you had Bob and Doug's help.
I did.
I know.
Yeah, he cheated. He had help. Bob and Doug were sitting right next to him.
Having played a lot of video games as a youth is probably helpful. But it's the Dragon actually approaches the space station very slowly, so it's actually very much slower than people realize. So I think it's not very difficult to dock with the space station because it is approaching very slowly, and you have very fine controls. In fact, you can adjust between sort of course corrections and fine control corrections. So you can adjust the thrusters to have sort of nuanced effects, or like broad brushstroke, fine brushstroke, and I think it's pretty straightforward to dock in light of that.
Tim Dodd, the astronaut. Question for pretty much anyone who can answer it. Elon, Kathy, Jim, the exact sequence of events today. It was kind of hard to tell actually when we're seeing the feed, and of course from the press site we just saw a cloud. Was it an engine shutdown was the initial trigger, and then did the Dragon, was the actual abort sequence? Was it the Dragon was triggered to abort, and then the engines shut down after that? And then, or was it like the shutdown of the engines? And then the sequence of events was actually kind of confusing and hard for us to figure out. And of course, we didn't really see much. Can you actually run us through what exactly was programmed when and how it all triggered and what triggered what, I guess, the chain of events?
Actually, I was thinking about posting the time sequence of events, what occurs in the course of about 700 milliseconds. It's really way more than a human could do is occurring in a fraction of a second. But the engines there's a command to the engines to shut down, and then the abort system then presses up very rapidly. The SuperDracos are ignited. It initiates separation from the upper stage. But all of this is occurring in literally a split second, it's really quite remarkable how quickly those engines reach full thrust, and all 8 of them do, and then it controls via differential thrust of the 8 SuperDraco engines, and so it's making those thrust adjustments at the almost the millisecond level. It's very, very fast.
And then the engines were shut down after that. So yeah. Then the launch vehicle, the first stage engines were all shut down at that stage.
So just to clarify, like the actual, I'm just trying to still figure out if it's like because the engine shut down that inherently triggered the abort, or was that all pre-planned? And hard sequence, basically. As
part of the abort sequence, like if the system detects that there's the things are severe enough to initiate an abort. In this case, we set the abort triggers to be super low, such that they would occur at a very specific sort of velocity. And as part of the abort sequence, one of the things that's done is issue a command to the engines to shut down. But you don't wait for them to get fully shut down. You issue command shutdown, and then you pressurize the abort system, the SuperDraco abort system, and a lot of these things are happening in parallel. So you're not waiting for one thing to occur after another. A lot of them are occurring in parallel. But it's saying shut down main engines, cut thrust, and then pressurize the abort system and fire up the abort system with all 8 SuperDracos. It's capable of working even if one of the SuperDracos does not. It's got engine out capability on the abort system, and then it's going.
So remember what the goal is. The goal is to get as much separation from the booster as possible as soon as possible. And what we saw is we got some data on this initially. It was correct me if I'm wrong, but it was like a kilometer of distance between a mile of distance between the booster and the Dragon, and it was just in a matter of seconds that separation was created. So that just shows you the capability, and all the while never exceeding 3.5 Gs. I mean, that's really amazing.
Yeah, even if it were to be the case that the booster engines continued firing after shutdown command, Dragon has enough thrust to accelerate away from the booster very rapidly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. This is going to conclude our press conference. I'd like to invite if any of our speakers have some closing remarks.
I think we should have our astronauts say a few words.
Well, again, I'll just reiterate, today was a very important day for us in the test program, and I think for all of the astronauts, we're very excited at what we've seen to this point, and we look forward to seeing the rest of the results. And we look forward to our continuing preparations for Doug and Bob to launch, and then after that for Victor and I to go up. So we're excited where we are right now. We're excited to continue training, to finish up the testing, and get ready for launch.
Well said. Important step on a long journey, and we're looking forward to the data analysis and learning more about the test today and the recovery efforts. Like I said, those are still going on, and yeah, we're grateful for all the hard work to get here, and looking forward to the work that we have left to do.
Well, thank you all. For more information, you go to nasa.gov. Thanks. Have a great day.
All right, so that wraps that up. So I got a couple things that I want to recap here that were brought up during the press conference, because there were a couple of interesting points, and they're going to switch back to the International Space Station stuff. We can go back here too, and maybe we'll replay the launch a couple of times while we're chatting about this here, because that's what everybody wants to see anyways, right? So, oh, wow, hello. Where's my... Okay, turn that down. Where'd that go? There we go. Sorry, I had to close the NASA TV window. I thought I closed it, but I just moved it. And let me get my replay text up here just so people know that this is a replay. Okay, so what I want to say, and then we'll get to some of your comments here. A bunch of people were commenting, but I didn't want to talk over them so we could all learn together and see what was going on. But one of the most interesting things actually was the last question, which was Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut, because this was very confusing to me. And it was even after he asked the question, Elon and Kathy gave two contradictory answers, or at least in my head, they sounded contradictory. And then I'm glad he asked for clarification, because then they finally did clarify, at least from what I heard. But the sequence of events, there was some confusion on how the abort was triggered. And actually, I thought this was a little bit differently. I thought they were going to shut the engines down, and that's what triggered the abort. Basically, they were going to have, because they kept saying that they wanted the abort sequence. They didn't want to just tell it to abort. They wanted the abort sequence to detect when to abort. And so it sounded to me like they were going to shut down the engines, and that's what would trigger the abort. But that's not what happened, according to what they just said right here. So what they said actually was that they set the abort triggers very low, and basically they made one of the abort triggers be a certain velocity. And so once the spacecraft reached that velocity, it violated the abort constraints, and that's what triggered the abort. And as part of the abort sequence told the engines to shut down. So that was actually part of the abort that was happening. So that was a little bit confusing beforehand, but I'm glad he clarified, glad Tim asked that question and that they got that clarified, because it was not the engines that actually triggered the abort, but it sounds like it was the velocity. There may be more complicated factors at work, but it sounded like, in a simple sense, it was reaching that velocity is what violated the abort constraints, and that's what triggered the abort. And as part of the abort, the engine shut down. So So I'm glad they clarified that. That was a little bit confusing. They did say the astronauts or our test dummies, our anthropomorphic test dummies that were in there, experienced about 3.5 Gs. It's a little bit less than even what they expected. They expected 4 Gs is what they kept saying, but they said they only experienced about 3.5 Gs. So that's good news. What else? It reached 40 kilometers in altitude, 131,000 feet. That's the actual Crew Dragon itself. That's what it reached at apogee after the abort sequence took place, which is we're going to see here in about 5 seconds here on the screen. You'll see the abort actually take place. There it is. There's the abort that took place earlier today. You can see the Crew Dragon in the middle of the screen here. Crew Dragon's over here. This is the first and second stage that are now being ripped apart, and then finally the big explosion there. Kaboom. Completely expected. That was supposed to happen. That's normal. That's what they wanted to see happen. And I lost one of my chat windows. Where'd it go? Okay. Well, I lost one of the chat windows here. I got to reopen it. For some reason, my chat window that has Periscope and Facebook, I lost it. So I had to reopen that. So if you were sending me comments on Periscope and Facebook, my stream is now blank. You'll have to re-comment and I'll see it. Dragon capsule got up to Mach 2.2, and Elon said that it was a picture-perfect mission at kind of first glance. And then the big question on everybody's mind is, when are they going to be launching Crew? Now, it's from what he said here is he had said earlier that they could be ready to launch as early as March, but it sounds like they are now looking at potentially launching that later. Because what he said was that the hardware should be at the Cape and ready end of February, beginning of March, but then they need to do potentially training for the astronauts and some checkouts for the hardware, and they would be launching in Q2, meaning the second quarter, which begins in April. So it looks like we're talking about crewed flight in April, which sounds a little more realistic to me. I was kind of skeptical about them launching beginning of March. That sounded like very, very quick. So I think we're looking at April time frame for a crewed mission potentially, but they said sometime in Q2. So let's see. And one of the things they said is they got to determine whether they're going to do short duration or long duration mission. So the plan was or is currently a short duration mission, but I imagine, they expected that Crew would be launching on these private vehicles sooner than this. And so they're getting to the point where we don't really have any more Russian rides scheduled. And so they're worried about not having American astronauts on the International Space Station. And so I think they're looking at potentially changing the plan to, instead of it being a short duration, change it to be a long duration. And if they do that, then they may need to train the astronauts a little bit more. It sounded like there might be some tweaks to the Crew Dragon that they might have to make, but it sounded pretty minimal. He didn't really elaborate on that, but yeah, they would. They're going to make that decision and decide. But it sounds like they're leaning towards potentially changing the DM2 mission to making it long duration. So let's see. Did we miss anything else that they covered in there? I think that pretty much covered it. The other thing that I thought was important, so Lauren Grush from The Verge asked about, I think it was Lauren, asked about the fireball and could the Dragon survive if the fireball happened while the Dragon was attached. And I think the most important thing that I heard come out of that was that the Crew Dragon capsule is able to react so fast and so quickly that in most abort cases, it would be able to start the abort before that fireball happened, because the fireball would be developing because of some sort of system failure, and it would detect the system failure and abort before the fireball happened. But if it just exploded instantaneously, which seems less likely, it still could survive and just fly out of the fireball. So a couple of important things that were in there as well. So you guys tell me in the comments what you thought, and then we're going to bring this thing home here and wrap it up in just a couple of minutes here. But I want to know what you guys thought about the press conference. If anybody has any more questions, we're going to keep the replay rolling here. and see what everybody thought here. Let's see. Elon said he's going to send. He might publish the actual sequence of events and timelines that happened within 700 milliseconds. There, that would be cool to see. Let's see. That must be hard to set the exact conditions to fire. The abort system must be a razor thin margin. Yeah, I imagine there's a bunch of different criteria that would trigger the abort, but it sounds like in this scenario, what triggered the abort was that they set the abort criteria very low, particularly the velocity, and once it exceeded that velocity, Dragon was like, well, I'm going too fast, time to abort, basically. But in a regular flight, they would increase that abort threshold to be, whatever the normal threshold would be. Yeah, launches are computer operated. The astronauts really don't fly like during the launch stage. They can take over. They can take over flight. Like if we had a situation like the OFT mission where the thrusters were having an issue, they had that timing issue, the astronauts could take over. It'd be the same thing for the Crew Dragon. The astronauts can jump in and take over. Let's see. So let's say, for example, the parachutes don't come out when they're supposed to. The astronauts should be able to trigger that, at least that command, from inside the capsule. They do have some manual control available. But under most circumstances, they shouldn't need to do anything. It should happen automatically. Hopefully they remember to set the speed limit back to normal. Yeah, right. Let's see. Ready hardware-wise, to be determined on NASA side. Yeah, so the hardware should be ready. Elon said the hardware will be ready end of February, beginning of March. But he did say that SpaceX needs to perform some checkouts. I imagine, especially for that first flight, that they are going to check things over 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times before they start flying this thing, because the amount of stress to have an actual person on board has got to be incredible. Like it's all fun and games until you actually put a human on board, and now you got a human life at stake, 2 human lives, in fact. That at that point now things are real. Like this has really got to work. Let's see. So maybe the dummies inside did have their sensor. So they said that the anthropomorphic test devices or test dummies did not have sensors on them, on the actual test dummies themselves. It was on the seats that they were actually measuring the G-forces. Let's see. You missed the rocket part re-entry from Jack Bayer. Was from his tweet, several tweets down from where you looked. Oh, I think I know which one you're talking about, Zach. I'll look at that in just a minute. It's the one where it's like face down, I think. Let's see. Caprina says it's amazing. Yeah, he said the fireball is more the issue than the concussion force of the explosion. Yeah, they said for the most part it's just like the actual fire that's happening. Successful test all around. Just hope they were testing the recovery crews as well. They are testing the recovery crews. You can see them in here. I'm going to back this up so we can all see more replay action, because that's the exciting part. But yeah, the recovery crews, the launch crews, they went through an entire simulation like as if this was a crewed launch. So they had the crew access arm connected. They walked through the whole dress rehearsal process of bringing astronauts up there and doing the whole thing. And basically they were pretending the crew were on board for the whole thing, even for the recovery part. Let's see. NASA doesn't want Boeing to look bad, so they'll make SpaceX wait. I don't think they're going to make SpaceX wait just so Boeing doesn't look bad, because I mean, as much as it always feels like NASA favors Boeing, I think NASA is very concerned that they won't have American astronauts on board the International Space Station, and that's way more important to them than making Boeing look good. So I don't think they're going to make SpaceX wait just so that Boeing can catch up. I mean, I think when SpaceX is ready, they're going to put astronauts up so that they can make sure that they have Americans on the International Space Station. That's a big concern for them. NASA, let's see. Oh, I just read that one. I thought they seemed shell shocked. Let's see. Trying to get through. They're already making up excuses to hold back SpaceX and favor Boeing. Thanks for the coverage. They're behind the scenes. I did find it interesting how much they seem to go back to needing more parachute testing. Almost seemed like even though they finished the 10 in a row requirement, this is something. Yeah, so the 10 in a row requirement was mostly just to certify that the actual they could use the parachutes. Now they needed to do like full system parachute tests, basically like letting the parachutes automatically deploy themselves and testing it with the computer systems on board the Crew Dragon capsule. So a lot of the parachute tests they did previously, they would pull the drogue chutes as they were deploying it from either from a helicopter or from a plane. So they're trying to do full system tests now at this point, and this was only the second time they've done a full system test. Let's see. Somebody else. I'm going to look at my Twitter notifications on my phone. I think somebody sent me something here. Let's see. The amazing part is we did all this in the 60s. What is old is new again. Yeah, I know. Well, it's... I think one of the interesting things, too, is that a lot has been improved since then. And even going back to the parachutes, like the parachutes themselves, that was something they struggled with even in the 60s. We just didn't hear about it as much, but that was a struggle for them as well, the parachute stuff. Let's see. Who pays for all the tests? SpaceX, NASA, both. So SpaceX is being paid. NASA is basically a customer of SpaceX. NASA put out a bid way back in 2012. I think they awarded the contract in 2014. But NASA put out a bid that said, we don't want to build our own vehicles anymore. We need somebody to build it for us. Who will build us a rocket? And then the companies bid and said, this is what we can design. This is what we'll do. And SpaceX and Boeing won the bids. They wanted two different providers so that they could have that dissimilar redundancy. Basically, they wanted two completely separate systems so that they could have that, they call it that dissimilar redundancy, so that if one system fails, there is nothing in the other system that could potentially be affected. The other system is designed completely differently, different components, different process, different manufacturing, the whole thing. It's a completely different system. So if something happens with the Crew Dragon and SpaceX, Boeing could keep flying. They don't have to ground Boeing for it. If something happens with Boeing, SpaceX could keep flying. They don't have to ground SpaceX because something bad happens with Boeing's process. So they have two completely different systems, and then they can always get American astronauts up to the International Space Station without having periods of months that they don't have flight capabilities. So let's see, I would hope all agencies would want to do this test as well. Yeah, Boeing opted to go the route of simulations instead of doing this in-flight abort test. And according to the criteria, that meets NASA's criteria. I don't exactly know what the contract criteria was. It does seem a little bit strange that Boeing isn't actually going to perform one of these tests, but NASA apparently feels comfortable that they are that they're not performing that test. So, let's see. I just want a crewed mission already. Yeah, I know. Me and you both. Why can't SpaceX land using thrusters instead of parachutes? So the Crew Dragon capsule actually has the capability to land with thrusters, but they won't because they are. It was going to be much harder to certify the capsule for crew flight if they use the thrusters for landing. So instead of using the thrusters for landing, they're going to do the parachutes. Although it sounds like the parachutes are giving them. I'm going to take this out of my ear. It sounds like the parachutes are giving them a hard time as well, but it was going to be much harder with the actual thrusters. So they didn't remove that capability. Like, the capability is still there. They're just not going to use it for any of the NASA flights because it's not going to be certified for crew safety purposes. So. Let's see. Congrats, SpaceX, NASA. You guys are the top dogs. Yeah, that was a pretty good mission today. Don't think the capsule can hold enough for fuel for landing after emergency. Don't think the capsule can hold enough fuel for landing after emergency ejection. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, sorry. I'm slow to read. Yeah, I don't think they could do propulsive. So the propulsive landing was only for a normal mission. I don't think they could do both an abort sequence and propulsive landing. There would not be enough, like Trip and Fool says here. I don't think they would have enough fuel left over to do both. It's going to be one or the other, but they're not doing the regular propulsive landing anyways. But even if they were, they couldn't abort and propulsively land. They just don't have enough fuel for that. Let's see. Big Kahuna says Boeing cuts safety corners to make more money for the executives and shareholders. Well, Boeing is definitely trying to make money. I wouldn't argue against that. But I don't believe that NASA is going to allow them to cut the safety corners. They're going to make sure that they have they've met the requirements of the commercial crew contract to make sure that they feel safe. And the astronauts that are on board, as you saw with Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley, also the guys that were at the press conference today, like they are there actively watching and participating in the development and testing process. And so, like, they have a lot of control and a lot of say in whether or not they will get on board these rockets. Like, if the astronauts are not comfortable with getting on board the rocket and in the capsule, they're not going to do it. So they have a lot of say in making sure that what's happening is safe as well. So they have to feel comfortable flying it before any of them will get off the ground. Amazed by all the attention the parachutes get. It always seemed like old basic technology to me that should be mastered by now. It would seem like that, Kevin, but the parachutes are actually probably one of the most complicated things on board. Both the capsules for SpaceX and for Boeing. I mean, there's a lot going into there. I mean, you've got drogue chutes that got to come out, so they got to be packed in there nice and tightly, and then they have to come out without getting tangled and actually open. Same thing with the main parachutes. They got to occupy a small amount of space when they're packed up and be able to open successfully. They got to be able to sit in the air. When they open, they got to be able to handle that shock of actually initially coming out when the vehicle's at high speed. They have to be able to start in a reefed position and then disreef. They have to not tangle while they're flying. I mean, you can see them kind of bouncing around and knocking into each other here. And then, I don't know, one of the things that I don't know, kind of gets overlooked a little bit, it was really apparent in the Boeing pad abort test from a month or so ago or whatever it was. The parachutes have to be able to detach from the capsule after landing because you don't want the parachutes to stay attached and then it lands and then all of a sudden it's being dragged down the desert floor for Boeing's case, or being flipped over in the ocean for SpaceX's case. So once it lands, they have to detach, but you also have to make sure they don't detach before it lands. So you need that capability, but you have to be able to control it. There's just a lot of variables that are involved. So yeah, it gets pretty complicated. You also got what I think it was Ashley was mentioning earlier. Those ropes will rub together, and you don't want to damage the integrity of any of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot going into it. All I heard the astronauts will drive the launch pad in a Model X for DM2. Is this a thing? I also heard that as well. I think they were planning to bring them to the pad in a Tesla. So I don't know if that's going to actually happen, but I did hear that as well. Did Elon say that it's far expensive to land the capsule in salty water? That they will be using a new capsule? Am I right on this? SpaceX will reuse the capsules, but not for crewed flights. I'll back this up for more replays while we're still talking here. SpaceX will reuse they'll refurbish and reuse them for cargo missions, but not for crewed missions. All the current NASA contracted missions will be on new Crew Dragon capsules. And that's just, that was kind of a requirement by NASA. They were not comfortable with using their refurbished capsules, although Boeing's using refurbished capsules, so that's a thing. But yeah, Crew Dragon will always be new capsules, which I don't really think it was that big of a deal for SpaceX, because if they can use them for cargo missions, then that's fine for them too. It's nice that they have that dual capability. Let's see. 2 of those parachutes side by side is about the size of a football field. Yeah, that is true. It's really hard to tell that in the video. They're 161 feet in diameter. So yeah, 2 of them, you're talking 320 feet. I mean, yeah, that's a football field. 2 of those parachutes together. And they don't look that big in the video, but they are huge parachutes. Enormous parachutes. And even we talked about earlier, you know, the rope or the cord on the parachute is at the junction where it attaches to the capsule. According to Ashley, it's like 5 inches thick at that point. You can't really tell that on the screen, but that's a big rope. So, and it's actually multiple strands there. Let's see. Parachutes will always be part of the capsule, even if they transition to thruster landing, I would imagine. Yeah, I don't know if you'll actually see them transition to thruster landing anytime soon. I think it was going to be too complicated for them. But yeah, they'll probably have parachutes on board, even if they plan on doing a thruster landing for abort contingencies or things like that. Then when will we have? Yeah, I don't expect them to move to propulsive landings anytime soon. They talked about maybe using propulsive landings for private non-NASA missions, but I think that's. I think once they perfect this process and they're doing it for NASA regularly, they'll probably just stick to this process because it's tried and true. Let's see. Who do you think Elon's talking about going into space on Dragon when he was asked, and he said nothing to announce at this time? Yeah, that was kind of curious, very mysterious. He was asked if they had any private customers lined up to fly on Crew Dragon, and he said, he just kind of looked and was like, we have nothing to announce at this time. Very mysterious. I have no idea who they're talking about, but it sounds like maybe somebody's very interested, and that could be much shorter, in the near future. Probably still talking years, but not decades. How long before we hear any more results of today's launch? Well, they were expected to get the Crew Dragon on board Go Searcher, the recovery ship, 2 hours after launch. So that would have been about 40 minutes ago. They should have recovered it. It sounded like they were maybe a little bit behind, so it might have. It's probably only been on board Go Searcher now for maybe 15-20 minutes, and they. Yeah, they'll be doing analysis for days and weeks. I mean, I think the press conference that we just watched was the immediate result that we're going to hear, and it won't be for days or weeks before we hear anything more, and that'll come in the form of probably, here's when we plan to launch astronauts. Let's see, what was Boeing's results on their? So Boeing had a timing issue. And basically the capsule did not correctly communicate with the Atlas V booster to obtain the timing of launch to get itself on the proper mission clock. And so it sounds like it was not necessarily a complicated issue, that they needed to correct that so that the capsule would communicate with the Atlas V and correct the mission timing. But I don't think they've come out with a full report on that yet. Eventually, we will get the full video from the bottom of the Dragon. It will be interesting to see the rapid deconstruction of the Falcon from that view. That would be awesome if Elon or SpaceX puts that out. Because yeah, we didn't really get a great view or video view of the destruction of the first stage, but it'd be awesome to get some higher quality footage of that. Jack 3D says, awesome, thanks for replaying this and answering questions. Yeah, thanks for hanging out and checking that out with us this morning. We've been going now for 3.5 hours. It's been a long one this morning. We're probably going to wrap up here soon, but I just wanted to make sure that I got to everything. Replayed this a couple times. Oh, Zach wanted me to show the second stage from Jack Bayer. Oh, and there was something else that I wanted to show, which I thought was kind of cool as well. Here, we'll show a couple things over on Twitter here before we wrap up. So over on Twitter, this was News 6 WKMG down in Florida that had their weather radar up and showed that the destruction of the first stage booster actually appeared on their weather radar shortly after launch there. So you can see it took this trajectory here, and you can see all the debris in the atmosphere that showed up on their weather radar, which I thought was kind of interesting. Occasionally that can occasionally happen with regular launches too. They'll even see like little blips from just like the engine exhausts on radar, but this is obviously more than a little blip. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then let's see, the other one was from Jack Bayer. Somebody wanted me to show. I think it's this picture. So this is at the Jack Bayer on Twitter. Make sure we give him some credit. Give him a like and a follow here. Awesome photographer. Took some great photos of Starhopper back when that launched back in August. But let's see, where was it? I think it was this one of what appears to be the second stage descending towards the ocean. And then John Krause had a picture of the first stage. He had a nice photo of launch. I'll just show him quickly there, but you can go check out Jack's page there for more photos. He takes some awesome photos as well. And then obviously we showed some of these earlier from Brandon over at Hoverslam Photography. It's at Brandon H Slam or at Hoverslam Space is his company. He took this awesome dramatic photo of the destruction of the first stage right after the abort happened. How do I get out of here? There we go. So yeah, there we are. Did we miss anything else? I think we pretty much covered just about everything here. Let's see, I'll get rid of that. We can get back to the comments. Yeah, that's the one. Says Zach, he's been waiting for that picture for a long time. Beats a 4 a.m. dock. Yeah, I know that one that was like docking of the Crew Dragon back for DM1. That was that was the undocking, I think, wasn't it? That I broadcast at like 4 o'clock in the morning. That was early. Do you think they'll use the propulsion system when there's no people on board? That's probably more likely. If they use the propulsion system, it would be for cargo missions, but I still think initially they're not even going to use, it won't be for a long time before we even see the propulsion system, because I imagine they are going to, they're going to run the cargo missions just like crewed missions, just so they can get additional test data and comfort levels with all the systems operating like they're supposed to. Let's see. Alex Ziggiful wants to know if we're going to do any giveaways. I'm not going to do any giveaways today. Sorry for that. Let's see. Who wrote this script? I'm not sure what you're referring to. I'm not scripting. If you can't tell that I'm not scripted, I'm shocked. Trippin' Fool, when's the next balloon launch? So our next balloon launch won't be till the spring at the earliest, so usually like April time frame. Winds are too strong this time of year for us to launch balloons, just because they go too far. Recovery is very, very hard for us this time of year. So springtime is be the first opportunity for our next balloon missions. Let's see. Docking, we watched the stuffed toys floating around. You mean the Space Kirby? This guy right here? Oh, I can't. He's getting green screened out. He looks black. It's green, but I have a green screen behind me. And you can see, actually, it looks better at this view. He gets green screened out because of the green in him. But yeah, there's my Space Kirby. I don't know what he's actually called. I think he's just called Earth, or what did Anne McClain, the astronaut, gave him a name like Little Earth or something like that. I just call him Space Kirby because I like that name better. So there. Let's see. Let's see. Thanks for the coverage. It's 5:15 here in Sydney, so I'm going to bed. I don't blame you there, Kilowatts. Will you cover the Strailing launch? I'm not aware of this, so I'm going to say no. Didn't you think the abort was after they announced Max Q, like a few seconds? Why didn't they abort exactly on Max Q? The abort was shortly after Max Q, so I imagine. So what they evaluated, obviously I don't have all the telemetry data available, but what they evaluated going into this is like where they thought. So Max Q is the point at which it's suffering the most aerodynamic stress, but in addition to aerodynamic stress on the vehicle, they also had to stress or check accelerations for the crew, and they wanted to test parachute performance, getting to certain speeds and certain velocities and all that kind of stuff. So they did do the abort shortly after Max Q. I think Max Q was at like 50 seconds or something like that, or maybe it was a minute, and then they aborted like 20 seconds later. So it wasn't right at Max Q. It was shortly after they passed through Max Q. But obviously they evaluated what the forces were going to be and what they were going to test and the velocities they were going to get to, and they decided that 84 seconds after launch was the point to test. Let's see, and I think it actually went 86 seconds after launch, right? Because we were at 1 minute and 26 seconds is when that actually covered. Oh, the Starlink launch. Oh, okay. I was like the Starlink. I didn't know what you were talking about. Starlink. I gotcha. Sorry, I've been talking for 3.5 hours. Yeah, when the Starlink launch is like Monday or Tuesday, I think. I have not thought that far ahead. When are we? What time is that launch at? I mean, I'll probably cover it, but I guess I don't. I gotta figure that out. I have not looked that far. I was really focused on this launch because I was stressed out yesterday when they said they were going to launch it at 11 a.m. yesterday, and I wasn't going to be able to broadcast for that. But let's see. Starlink is currently scheduled for Tuesday at 11:59 a.m. So basically like noon Eastern time Tuesday. I'll have to see if we can do that. We might be able to do that, but I will find out, and I'll let you know on Twitter and put up an event. I'll put up an event if we can do it. But yeah, so usually Twitter is where I would post that stuff first, but you'd also see an event here on the YouTube channel as well. So let's see. Great job on covering this launch. Thanks, Wayno. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future launch coverage. Yes, thank you, Sebi, for that. Subscribe, maybe give a thumbs up or send some hearts over on Periscope if you like this kind of stuff, because we have some fun. We're having a good time here. Sorry, I read on my TV. I probably should have picked up on that. Because the Starlink launch is just not even on my radar right now. I know it's on Tuesday, but it just was not on my radar whatsoever. So I read your thing and I was like, the what? You want me to do the what launch coverage? But Starlink, right, Tuesday, Starlink. Whew, it's been a long morning. It's also been a long morning because I kept waking up. Like, I woke up at 6 o'clock thinking that the launch was going to be at 8 o'clock. Woke up, they're like, nope, it's going to be at 9 o'clock. So I was like, all right, I'm going back to bed for an hour. And then I woke up at 7 o'clock. They're like, nope, it's going to be at 10 o'clock. So then I went back to bed for an hour again. Because I didn't get to bed until like 2 o'clock in the morning last night. So I'm trying to get all the sleep I could. I was exhausted. Let's see. 21st, 11:59. Yeah, that's the Starlink one coming up. So is there an update on the car launch? The car launch? What car? Are you talking about like the Tesla Roadster from Falcon Heavy? I don't think we're expected any more updates on that. I mean, that's just out there. Maybe I'm missing something. You should do a video with Smarter every day. I'd love to do a video with Smarter every day. Dude's awesome. Have you ever talked about Space Force? I mean, we've talked about it in the past. I don't know. It's a thing now, and it's happening. So I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we ought to wrap things up since we've been going for a long time. I think I got to everybody's comments. If you see anything cool from the launch, make sure you send it over to me on Twitter. If you want to join the conversation after the fact, we do have a Discord, and I think there's a link in the YouTube video description to our Discord channel where all of our space geeks hang out after the fact. So you can certainly join in the Discord channel if you want to chat it up a little bit. And if you want to be a part of any sort of early access to the scripted videos, you can join our Patreon and get early access to some of the videos and some of the exclusive Discord channels that are for Patreon members only. So we got that going on. And I totally missed my alarm, and grateful you do this with replays. I know that's my biggest fear every time we have one of these early morning launches is that I'm gonna like sleep through my alarm when I'm supposed to get up and broadcast, and all of a sudden I'm gonna wake up like 3 hours later, and you guys are gonna all be in the chat like, "Where is he?" And I'm gonna be sleeping. It's like my biggest fear. It hasn't happened yet though. But yeah, I think we covered it all. Yeah, make sure you follow over on Twitter and subscribe to the channel. We're getting close to 10,000 subscribers. We're not there yet, but we're getting close. And we got some plans for 2020. We're gonna try to do some more videos here, trying to beef up our setup a little bit. But we've got plans for 2020, and like I said, we're close to 10,000 subscribers. We're only 65 subscribers away from 10,000. That's pretty awesome. I can't believe there's so many people that like to listen to me go on about these launches, but I'm having fun, and it sounds like at least some of you guys are having fun along with me. Some of you maybe not. Of course, there was somebody earlier in the chat today that told me to just shut up, so that's all right. Sorry if this is not your thing, but for everybody sticking around, thanks, I appreciate it. And yeah, hopefully we can get to 10,000 subscribers soon, and then we need anybody that has any ideas. I feel like we got to do something special once we reach 10,000 subscribers, so if you have any ideas for something you want to see when we reach 10,000 subscribers, I'm just kind of assuming that we're going to reach 10,000 subscribers. Maybe that's bold of me to assume that we're going to reach 10,000 subscribers, but assuming we reach 10,000 subscribers, if you have any ideas for something you want to see when we get there, leave it in the comments or shoot a message over to me on our Discord channel or Twitter or or Facebook, whatever. Yeah, I'm everywhere. We've even got a TikTok account now. I don't really use it yet. I've not really posted anything on there yet, but someday I'll figure out how to use it. We got one of those TikTok machines. Everybody was laughing about that the last time. I still don't know how to use the TikTok machine, but I'm told that's what the kids use these days is the TikTok. So we got a TikTok. Just got to figure out how to use it. By the way, proud of you for the highest puck drop. Yeah, thanks. If you haven't seen that yet, the highest puck drop record that we set with the Las Vegas Golden Knights, the NHL hockey team. We did that back in September. There's a video on our YouTube channel. That was a lot of fun to do that. So go check that out. Nice to have other space geeks to chat with during these launches. I know, it is kind of nice. Makes it fun when you guys are all chatty in the comments because I like to geek out with everybody. So thanks for joining in with the chat as well, because it really makes the broadcast more interesting when everybody's involved, right? When everybody's having a good time. So, all right, that's it. We've said it all. We've probably said too much, but I figure we ought to wrap this up, and I can move on for the day and check out all these bazillion notifications I got on Twitter here because I still haven't gone through them all. But appreciate everybody sticking with me here today and joining in to see that successful in-flight abort test. That was pretty awesome. That explosion was even better than I expected it to be. It kind of caught me off guard and surprised me in real time, but it was awesome. I was hoping that it was going to be something like, I didn't think it was going to be like that, but I was hoping it was. And so I wasn't disappointed either way. So, all right, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name's Tori. This is Overlook Horizon, and we'll see you on the next video. Maybe Starlink on Tuesday. I don't know. We'll let you know. All right, thanks, guys. Have a good rest of the day. See ya.